morning.
Alan, you're over here.
Welcome, folks from south of Clearwater, to here with a few North County folks. Our chair and vice chair have been texting me saying they've been on their way for a very long time because of the traffic, but they're on their way. Bill Johnson said he's about 10 minutes out.
He's not using the transit system?
No, he's not. I'm very honored that we're all here together. You know, this is really the first time post green light that the PSTA board has had an opportunity to sort of talk together and pave the roadmap, or start to have the discussion about how we move forward from here. I'm going to go ahead and introduce John Streetmatter. So the agenda for the day generally is a discussion that we really want all of you, each board member, to participate in, that John will lead based on the one-on-one interviews that I believe almost all of you had over the last month. And those interviews have been summarized, and the takeaways have been summarized, and John's going to go over that with you. And we're going to have a discussion about that, because we're not necessarily trying to rehash Green Light Pinellas. I think all of us have done that in some format or another. This is really taking the lessons learned from there and then looking ahead to what we might want to do. Then we're going to have a lunch. We're going to break for lunch, and then in the afternoon, I am doing my very, very best to minimize lecturing, but we're going to have a discussion with some maps about the different scenarios that PSTA might face, and then try to get some discussion going in the afternoon on that. The workshop is scheduled to go till 3:08. I don't think necessarily we'll need that much time, and depending on if US 19 is open by then, we can leave. So, with that, let me introduce John Streetmatter.
All right, thanks, Brad.
Thanks.
Well, let me give you just a little bit of background so you have some idea of sort of where I'm coming from in this process. I want to talk mostly about my role, what my role is today, and what my role, frankly, is not today. So we're sort of to make sure we're all on the same page. So I live in North Pinellas. I'm a leadership consultant partner in a national leadership consulting firm, but have done a lot of community-based facilitation work with a number of county governments and other public-private entities around the state. I am not, nor do I claim to be, a governmental expert. That's not the point. But have enough familiarity with, through working with various county commissions and various city governments on some of those issues, and then groups like yourself as well. I have been a long-time Leadership Florida member and had the chance to chair Leadership Florida a few years ago as well. And so, like you, I'm invested in not just this community, but our state. And so I'm just pleased to be able to be here and play a role to help you talk through that today. I want to talk a little bit in more detail about sort of the process design, if you will. So the genesis of this was, Brad and in conversations with board members and with Tony Collins from Blake Collins Group, talked about, look, we would like to have a workshop to get the group together to be able to talk. And so in doing so, they said, we need a facilitator for that conversation based on some prior experience of some of you around the table and others. I think that's how they got to me in my work with the commission and the Clearwater City Council and some other groups as well. And so we had some conversations to talk about how would we design that workshop, and we really talked about sort of two different paths. The first was to just, as Brad mentioned, to interview you, to say what are the things that are on your mind. The reason to do that is to make sure we're talking about the right stuff. Right? We could talk about a lot of different topics. What we want to make sure we're doing is talking about the topics that are important to you. And so Tony conducted those interviews because he had them pre-existing on his schedule. It was the best way to make those happen. I've seen all the interview notes. Tony and Brad and I have had a chance to talk through that. And then we also met with the executive committee to say, hey, based on the interview results, here are the key topics that are coming up. Here's how we would recommend the agenda. The executive committee gave me their feedback about that, and we've designed the process in that regard. So let me talk very, very specifically about my role, right? I use the word facilitator on purpose. My role is to facilitate the dialogue. What my role is not is to provide you with recommendations. I'm not saying, here's what you should do, here's what you shouldn't do. I'm going to stay 100% out of that role. My role is simply to facilitate the conversation, design the process, and make sure that we hear from all of you. But I'll be trying to synthesize the takeaways from the conversation. But I want to be clear about what sort of my role is and what my role isn't. I may push you from time to time for clarity to say more about a certain topic. That's merely to make sure that we have a full understanding of the topic. It's not meant to steer the conversation one way or the other. I just want to make sure we get all the perspectives from you as board members out and on the table. So with that, let's talk about, Brad touched on it briefly, but I want to talk about it in a little more detail. You should be, I have, I think 6 or 7 slides and between now and lunch. And I thought you might like that, because that's what you said. And frankly, we're going to cover all 6 of those in the first 10 minutes or so. And then the rest of it is going to be discussion. So the agenda is really sort of 4 topics. The first is I'm going to briefly just give you a synthesis of the themes, the key themes that Tony, Brad, and I heard as a result of your one-on-one interviews. I'm going to check in with you to make sure that those sound accurate to you. We'll spend the bulk of our time on this lessons learned discussion. That came out very clearly in the interviews, as you'll see. Pardon me. We'll have a brief conversation after lunch around sort of core purpose, just to make sure we have a chance to talk to each other about how do we think about PSTA's core purpose. And then finally, as Brad talked about, this idea of sort of, let's make sure we're all on the same page. Let's clarify and level set around what the various sort of future options look like. The objective of that conversation is really to have you as a board be able to say, look, here's the information that I would need to be able to have an opinion about those various options, right? It's a board workshop, not a board meeting. We're clearly not taking action on any of those scenarios. That's not the point of today. We simply want to say, here's a few scenarios based on where we are. What information do you need? So we can make sure that you're essentially setting direction for Brad and his staff to say, here's the questions that I'd like to have answered before I am placed in a position of having to make a decision. But today's, it's not about making a decision today. It's merely about, let's just make sure we all have the same information and know what your direction is. Okay, so those are the 4 topics for today. So with that, let's dive into the interview themes. We heard a clear theme around this idea of sort of discussing lessons learned, right? And I want to be clear about this lessons learned language, right? It's not, hey, we want to get together and rehash what happened. It's, we need to learn from sort of what we've seen over the past few months, particularly as it relates to the ballot initiative. And we need to just have a conversation about what are the lessons so we can apply them on a going forward basis. And so we'll do that first, and that theme was a large part of why we designed the day the way we did. In a number of the interviews, again, we heard this idea of we need to focus in on the bus components of the plan. You know, rail was a component of the ballot initiative. What we heard from many of you in the interviews is, look, we need to focus in on bus right now and be thinking about that on a going forward basis. A number of you talked about the idea of sort of PSTA's role in the transportation conversation, certainly within the county and maybe even more broadly. And what we heard was your belief that said, I think we should take a leadership role in that regard. And you'll see that that's actually one of the topics we're going to talk about from a lessons learned perspective as well. The 4th bullet here, a number of you talked about, look, we've got to make sure that we have a credible reputation in the community around efficient operations, particularly sort of, are we operating as efficiently as we can? Are we managing the operation in a fiscally responsible way? So those were some of the themes. There's just 3 more bullet points. A number of you talked about this idea of making sure we're focused in on customers. And so, you know, how do we think about who our customers are? What are their needs and demands? How do we make sure that what we're doing is matched up with what those customer needs are and customer service mentality? And you talked about sort of the idea of, talked a little bit about the role of the board vis-a-vis the role of management, right? So the board should be setting policy direction with input from the staff and other informed sources like consultants and others, and then sort of the staff should be executing that. So again, we've tried to build today's session to be all about that bullet. What is the direction? what are the information that you need so that the staff can then be executing to your wishes. And so that's certainly how we've structured the conversation, is to be able to do that. And then finally, a number of you talked about what you've termed the fiscal cliff, and 2 points came out of that, right? This idea of it's a critical issue, clearly a critical issue that we've got to dive in on. That's part of what drove this scenario, or the option conversation we're going to have later today, is look, we need to get real about what those various options are in light of the fiscal situation. But this integrated piece, right? You can't just deal with that fiscal situation without understanding how it affects all of the various operations, goals, objectives, even mission and core purpose of PSTA. And so this theme is in many ways how that conversation about core purpose came about, as well as the option conversation. And then finally, a number of you sort of provided some input around this admittedly simple continuum that starts on the far left with the idea of, sort of, are we providing basic needs, then all needs moves to sort of a combination of needs and wants, all needs, some wants, all wants and needs. And the question was really, sort of, hey, if you had to say where's PSTA currently on this continuum, what would you say? And what you see is there's a little bit of a clustering around the middle, and there's a little bit of clustering sort of to the left of the continuum, right? Look, we're in need land. We're not in want land. You expressed sort of a desire to move to the right, but some significant challenges with doing so. And so with that, I want to just stop for a moment, just check in with you to get your reaction to what I've talked through. Again, hopefully what you see is, many of you say, yeah, I talked about that, I talked about that, I talked about that. But I am interested in just checking in to see your reaction to the themes that we've presented thus far, and if there's anything that you felt was missing or anything you'd like to add for the benefit of the others around the room.
If I might just ask the question to clarification, because
Sure.
that first bullet point is a bit out, it surprises me, for lack of a different word, because I'm not quite sure, given the huge outreach that was done, and the depth of the research to get the plan where it was, I don't understand, like, what more does the person think could have been done in terms of listening?
Got it.
I mean,
Okay.
that's all we did for 2 years.
Okay.
It seems.
Thoughts from the group? I prefer, yeah.
That was one of the concerns I had, but it was in a different matter. I was looking at going forward. What we do as it pertains to physical responsibility is going to affect the end customer. So we have to take the lessons learned,
Right.
the data, and try to minimize that as much as possible. That was my interpretation when I talked to Mr. Collins on that subject matter.
Right.
I know we went out and did a lot of that, but right now, faced with a financial cliff and having maybe a reduction in services, how is it going to affect the end user based on what we learned and what they told us? That was my interpretation.
Got it. Other thoughts from the group? I don't want to speak for you guys, please. Councilman Holmes.
Were you talking about the green light proposition here, basically?
Well, the statement says that the board should develop a greater understanding of its customers by listening and more in-depth research.
Okay, because I've looked into this, the whole green light thing. There's several major, hindsight's 20/20.
Right.
But there were several things that, when you looked at the green light promotion, you mentioned early on to discuss PSTA's role in transportation. That's not what PSTA did. Transportation includes buses, automobiles, traffic signals, road construction, et cetera, et cetera. And I think when you took green light, it was focused, A, on light rail going north and south, when your jobs go east and west. If you look at your job corridor, which we got in the city commission meeting a couple weeks ago, you go down Almerton Road, and you're going to see all these areas that are designated industrial. Well, your rail's going the wrong direction, for one. Secondly, it never addressed the fact that more people drive a car don't you think that the PSTA would be ahead of the game to work together with the people who are driving the cars and say, you know, we're gonna go for this extra revenue, and here's what we're gonna propose to the county. We're gonna help the county get the traffic signals timed, so you can get a more, you know, a flow going through here with the cars, and at the same time, we'll go to FDOT, and we're gonna get money for cutouts for when these buses stop to pick up passengers. They're not gonna be blocking the road. And, you know, we're gonna put a coordinated effort through here where the car drivers can be happy, the bus passengers can be happy, and as far as light rail is concerned, if you're gonna run light rail north and south, every time it's crossing the road, you're gonna have a gate go down, it's gonna stop the cars. That's almost self-defeating. So, I mean, I would say, thought you'd have to run something a little more coordinated.
Commissioner Welch?
Well, to Commissioner Holmes' comments, green light, Pinellas, was about multimodal transportation. It was not just about rail. And it included transportation, it included Google cars, you name it. All those things were integrated as part of green light. This wasn't my statement, but when I read it, I don't view it as a rehash of green light and what went wrong.
Right.
I read it as moving forward, and green light is done. Green light is in the past. Moving forward, for us to provide transit service to our customers, we've got to have that understanding of what their needs are as we look at routes that we are going to have to cut. How does that affect those customers? Where is the demand for express bus service? That's how I view that bullet. I don't view that bullet as looking backwards towards green light. I look at it as going forward, we've got to have that better understanding. And that wasn't my comment, but that's the way I read it.
Yeah, that certainly is the flavor of the theme that we got. I didn't want to speak for you, but what Councilmember Newton said, what you said as well, is really the theme that we heard related to your question is that was about customers of PSTA service. It was not a comment that was directed to the Green Light Ballot Initiative. It was about customers more broadly. So no, it's a good question. That's exactly why I wanted to check in with you, is for exactly these kinds of clarifications. So that certainly would match with what I heard from a number of folks in addition to the folks that spoke up.
And also, why it may be a good soundbite, we need to move forward. Today is the first day of the rest of our lives. So we can go over that 20, 30 times, it's not gonna change what happened. But we do have people we have to serve that's gonna be affected. We're a Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority. And if as you speak to FDOT, FDOT is the organization for, they're the organization for transportation. It's not, the Florida Department of Transportation, not the Florida Department of Roads. So they get all modes of transportation, not just cars. We don't do anything with cars. We deal with buses and the people that ride the buses. Our purpose is to give people transportation options to get them out of the cars and relieve the congestion. You know, and that's what we do.
Right.
So we're an option for that car. If you can't afford to pay car payments or insurance or gas, we're an option. We're a transportation option. That's it. And we're just looking going forward, how are we going to best serve up this product to our end users? And that's all I came here for.
Yeah, great. Okay, any other thoughts or comments? Yes, sir.
You know, for 2 years, and even beyond that, but before that, when Green Light was being developed and the planning and everything that went into it, you know, and then all the outreach that happened before the referendum, and there's still a lot of people that didn't even know that, which to me says that transit is not really top of mind for a lot of people. You know, for the ones that use it, they just want to know it's there when they need it, and beyond that, it's out of sight, out of mind. So you need to, somehow we need to figure out a way to elevate that importance, that need, the reason why it's a good thing, a good idea.
Okay, great. Yes, please.
Coming right along behind that, when you reach the age of not driving anymore, or you reach the age of having to go out and get a job, and you don't have any other way to do it, or due to circumstances beyond your control, you lose your vehicle. And those are the people that were concerned. It wasn't the people that were driving. So those are our customers. Those are our core base of customers. Employment, food, And school,
Medical.
medical,
Getting to the doctor, getting to the hospital.
yeah. Those are our core base of customers. It's not the people that are driving here today.
Okay. So,
And
any,
Vivian.
any other thoughts for themes? Yes, sir. Mark?
Yeah, we did the transit interview a couple of months ago. We spent $700,000 to get people going out and talking to the various people on the buses. And from those, we should know where on the buses these people are and where they're going. So a lot of this understanding about where they're going, we should have already. So it goes, going back into those interviews that we have with all these people, we should know what exactly has to be done. And there is not a lot more to do there.
Yeah. Okay. All right, well, just from this discussion, I think, I feel even better about sort of the agenda we put together, right? Because the lessons learned piece is intended to do exactly what a couple of you described, right? Look, based on what we now know, what should we do on a going forward basis? Not to rehash what we've done, but where we're going. Your comment just a moment ago, I think, and the one that you made as well, is really around this idea of core purpose, right? Like what is our core purpose, and therefore, who are our customers, and how do we really get focused in on those? So what I'd like to do is let's transition to that lesson learned conversation. I just wanted to, again, briefly just sort of set some context, pardon me, share with you the key themes that we heard from the interviews, which essentially shaped how we built the day, but also just check in to make sure that we had heard you correctly. Brad, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think it would be good if, John, you could just take a quick second to go back over that last slide on the timeline or the continuum there and describe, we asked during the interview two questions, right? Where you think PSTA is on that continuum now, and then
Right.
where, I can't remember, where do you want it to be?
Yeah, where would you like it to go in the future?
And then what do those X's?
Yeah, so the X's in the future essentially are all to the right. I didn't want to make it too confusing. The key point is, what folks said is, look, at best, we're meeting some needs, some wants.
Those X's represent what people
Where we are
say
today.
we are now.
Where we are today, and if you put the arrows on them that said, which way do you think we need to go, I would characterize the conversation as people saying, look, there's a whole bunch of pressure to move it to the left. We'd really like to figure out how to move to the right. Whether you were on the far end where you said, look, we're just above basic needs, we're feeling pressure to even maintain that, boy, it'd be better if we could do more. Folks that were in the middle said, boy, we're at some needs, some wants. Fiscal cliff realities and the no new revenue scenario means, we're going back to somewhere between basic needs and all needs pretty quickly. I sure would like to be further to the right at some point into the future, but that's how I would characterize it, right? So this is today. There's clearly pressure that's pulling the organization left on this continuum because of the fiscal cliff primarily, but a desire for how can we make sure that we're better meeting the needs of all of our customers. So a desire to move right and understanding the reality that there's a whole bunch of stuff pulling you to the left. Did that help? Did I clarify your question? Okay, so then let's talk about this the lessons learned discussion, okay? And so really, we've tried to set this up in a straightforward manner, right? And so what we're simply going to do is, we're going to tackle 4 or 5 different topics. And essentially what we're trying to do is fill in the blank to this sentence, right? Based on what we now know about a particular topics that came out of your interview themes, and I'll share those with you in just a moment. Going forward, we should be sure to, whatever that thing is. That's really the lesson, right? What happened is, to Commissioner Welch's point, right, that's in the past, we've had a chance to talk through. What we need to be thinking about is, what do we do as a result of what we've learned? What do we now do on a going forward basis? So this is the format, we set that to you in advance, right? Based on what we now know about blank, going forward, we should be sure to, and then that's a chance for all of you to talk about lessons learned. The way we're going to do that is through the whiteboards here, and let me just be completely transparent about why we're doing it that way. we want to get as many voices heard as possible. In a conversation like this, only one of you can talk at a time. When we get to the whiteboards, you can all say what you want about all of these topics. What we'll then do is come back and just go board by board, look at all the input, see if there's any key themes, see if we can synthesize the key lessons learned. But it's purely an efficiency play in terms of how do we get as much input from you as possible in as quick a way as possible. And so that's why we're going to have you write your thoughts on the board, and then we'll have a chance to deal with every comment as a group, but we'll gather them in that fashion. Okay, so here are the 5 topics that when people talk about lessons learned, they said, here's what I want to talk about. Here's what we need to learn from. And it was really these 5 things. So the first is the idea of sort of PST's role in the transportation conversation. Second was around this idea of communicating our message clearly and to the right people. So that sort of was the, what do we learn about the ballot and referendum initiative? Not to rehash what we did, but what do we learn from that we can apply to future communication efforts? That's really topic number 2. The third was, you know, we learned a lot through the past few months about sort of the citizens and customers' perception of PSTA and our various set of services. What lessons can we learn from that? What should we do on a going forward basis based on what we've learned about that? There clearly was a number of you that said, look, we learned some things about citizens' reaction to new tax revenue. So we need to learn from that. We need to be thinking about what we do on a going forward basis there. And then finally, this idea of citizens' reactions to new modes, such as rail or even bus rapid transit or any of those kinds of things as well. So those are the 5 topics. You'll see that there's here is sort of based on what we now know about PSTA's role in the transportation conversation going forward. We should be sure to communicating our message clearly, citizens' perceptions of PSTA and our services, the reaction to tax revenue there, reactions to new modes such as rail and bus rapid transit, okay? And so what I want you to do, I think it's going to take about 15 minutes, maybe even longer than that, because there's a number of you. What I want you to do is literally fill in the blank, right? Put your thoughts on, for instance, let's start here. Based on what we now know about PSTA's role in the transportation conversation, going forward, we should be sure to, what would you say? You may have a couple of bullets. That's fine. What I want to do is I want to get all of your input on all of these questions on the boards so that we can then collectively see what we think and we can talk about what our reactions are, okay? So, but take about 15 minutes. There's markers scattered all throughout the boards here, and just capture your thoughts. I want to make sure we get all the thoughts listed on each of the 5 boards. You can go in whatever order you want, just sort of find a board that's open, grab a marker, and we'll take whatever time we need to gather all of your input, okay? Okay, so as I mentioned, you know, we've got all the input on the board. So what I want to do now is just go topic by topic. And what we're really looking for is, are there any common themes, any discussion we want to have? If we can synthesize some key takeaways, that would be great. And so we'll start here. So this is based on what we now know about PSTA's role in the transportation conversation. Going forward, we should be sure to, and I know it can be difficult to read, I'm going to read to you all the bullets, right? So going forward, we should be sure to make sure we engage all the right partners, make sure we have clearly defined PSTA's role, run the current system to the best of our ability, improve the high volume routes, build a relationship to greater transit role in the community. How is our mission connected to better jobs, education, and health, and more personal time? We need to validate the PSTA role with the community, continue to provide transportation service to those people in our county who most need it, especially in light of the community bus plan data on ridership demographics, workers, transit dependent, et cetera, and think more about how we can encourage people who currently do not use public transportation to use it. Janet, change the culture, broaden the conversation to include the entire community involving non-users by showing value, emphasis on showing value, push for new grants and revenue sources, and then provide transportation options, bus rapid transit, rail, and premium pay for use services like express lanes. So those were the comments. Yes?
In the red one on the left?
Yeah, build a relationship to greater...
Not transit role, but greater transportation role.
Transportation role, okay, thank you. So any themes that you see there, comments that you'd like to make to each other? What should we learn about the role in the overall transportation conversation based on what you've said here? What are your thoughts?
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
So the reason this topic is here is because most of the board saw a need to change our role or establish our role or maintain our role.
Right.
Is that how this bullet got here?
So how this bullet got here was we heard a number of you say in the conversation about sort of what role should PSTA play, a number of folks said we should continue to play a leading role in the transportation conversation, right? It was, at least what we heard from the board was, the board said, and we sort of took a leading role in that conversation leading up to the ballot initiative. We should continue to play a leading role in the transportation conversation. Not the only role by any stretch, as you see reflected by a number of things here with partners and et cetera, but it was the idea of a leading role. And so that's why we put this here, was just to try to clarify, so what, like, is that really what everybody thinks, and what does that role look like? Does that help?
It does. You want comments on it?
Please.
I guess what I would bring out of all of that is the word focus. Because last year we kind of took on everything that was in Greenlight. And a lot of that was beyond the scope of bus service and bus service delivery. I think, sure, we should have a role in partner with FDOT and other stakeholders, but I think we need to refocus on our core mission and our core role of providing the best bus service that we can.
Okay.
We took on a lot during Greenlight that wasn't our baby, so to speak.
Right. That was part of taking on that broader role, right?
Right, but I think our role should be on what our main task is, and that is the bus service.
Got it.
And all those other things fit into that.
Okay. Okay. Other thoughts? Again, I'd like to have a full conversation about it. The point was to just gather the data here so that you could see what everybody else was thinking, but I definitely want to know what you think. Chair?
Building on Commissioner Welch's comment on focus, but put it in perspective of why we are transit, and why transit is needed in the community, what that role is in the community, and get their feedback on it, to know is that what they perceive our role to be.
I don't understand what you just said.
Instead of just saying our role is to provide transit, our role is to provide a service to the community that transit is a part of that role.
What other part is there?
Well, within the greater transportation picture, we are the transit agency, and how does that fit with the other elements of transportation within the community? Why do we need public transit? Why do we need public transit? Is it just for the folks that have DUIs or are too poor to have a car?
Well, it enhances the quality of life in our county, or in any community.
Right. In what ways does it enhance that quality of life?
It gives people options.
Gives people options. Right. It provides a service to those who might be on welfare if they couldn't get to a job or they couldn't get to education.
Can I chime
So-
in? Are we going?
Yeah. Jan, make one comment, and then I'm going to get to both of you. I want to hear from a number of you.
I think that's a little, I mean, I agree with you, Commissioner. It's a little bit in the weeds, though, for the conversation we're having today, from my perspective, because PSTA is a public agency that obviously our community, a long time ago, agreed that we need in our county because they voted to tax themselves for it. So, I mean, I see it as a system, and the PSTA role as a board is to ensure that that system is run to the very best of its ability within the revenues that we have.
Yeah, okay. Councilmember Newton, and then.
Well, I just want to say it's not a poor or welfare thing. I travel to Phoenix, Boston, Seattle, and I use the public transit every time I go there. And I'm not on welfare, and I'm definitely not poor. However, it's about providing transportation options. We're a transit organization, and Jenny hit dead on the head. You have the taxation without representation. If you're taxing the people to provide transportation, so that's what that does. You don't have to be poor. You just somebody need a transit or want to have options. That's it. And we're providing transportation options. That's what we're providing. That's the way I look at it.
Okay, Pat?
As probably the oldest member of the board.
Why is this?
I'm not gonna go anywhere near that. I'm just gonna allow it as a comment and you just keep talking.
It's an option that a lot of us have to have. It's not a matter of if I'm poor or rich. Yeah, if I was rich enough, I could hire a limousine to go everywhere, but I need the public transit system. Now, going back to as a child in Pinellas County, Florida, at the age of 7, 8, 9, 10, I couldn't wait for the bus to get there every Saturday because it provided me transportation from St. Pete Beach to St. Petersburg, to Williams Park, where we got off and walked all over St. Pete, and if we were lucky, had lunch at the Gold Room in Moss Brothers.
I remember that.
Okay, you remember that.
Careful.
You remember that, however, I spent money every Saturday of my life. We all went to Webb City. We all spent our money. And we used public transportation to get there. Now, we've lost that. We need to get back to it. And I think that we need to teach our kids how to use public transportation. We've lost it. We have, yellow buses following PSTA buses. We need to look at that. We need to look at where we are, where we're doubling public transportation. And I don't mean our own buses. I mean that we need to go where we haven't been before, that we used to be in the olden days. It's there, it's possible, it's workable, we just need to do it.
Learn from the past.
Yeah, well, and the thread of this conversation, we're going to dive into more deeply in the core purpose conversation as well. So I think these comments frankly set the context for that as well. It's been useful in that regard. I do want to come sort of push you a little bit on the role in the transportation conversation, right? You've heard Commissioner Welch say, look, I think we should focus in on running the agency and sort of our role as the agency as opposed to this idea of a broader transportation conversation more broadly. A number of you in the interviews talked about, I think we should be leading the transportation conversation like we did during the ballot initiative. Again, I want to be super clear. I'm not trying to push you one way or the other. I just heard in the interviews folks say we need to play the leadership role. We've heard a bullet point here about focus. That's great. And if we're all in that place, that'd be awesome. I'm just trying to make sure we hear from all of you about what does that role look like. Commissioner?
And I don't think it's mutually exclusive.
Okay.
If there's some regional conversation, Howard Franklin Bridge, for example, Gateway Express,
Got it.
yeah, we need to be involved in that, but that shouldn't be our number one priority, I don't think.
Got it.
I think the focus needs to be, how many buses can we keep on the road for the demand that's there? And going back to the community bus plan, we know that most of our riders ride the bus 5 days a week.
Right.
And this is their way to get to employment. And so to me, that's our core service. It doesn't exclude all those other larger regional conversations.
Got it. Okay.
I would agree with Commissioner Welch to the point of focus. When I read the comments that are up there, I don't really see a consistent theme. I see fragmentation, I think, and by no fault of our own, the green light thing did fragment us. We got away from the core values of what we're trying to do in the services, trying to be all things to all people, and obviously push the green light thing. And I hear from Commissioner Long, really we just need to focus on what we do, the services that we provide. And at our previous board meeting, we had a discussion of, changing it, making the more popular routes as efficient as they can be, and prove that we know how to run the system that we have. And I don't know that we have proven that we know how to run the system that we currently have.
Okay. Other thoughts?
I was the one that put down the one about providing transportation options, BRT, light rail, and premium pay-per-use services like express lanes. There's nothing wrong with the green light plan. There was nothing wrong with the green light plan. There was nothing wrong with the green light plan. The people didn't want to be taxed to pay for it. So what you do is you get the ones who drive the cars or who wants to use the service to pay for the service. It's really simple, like a gas tax, you know. If you ride a bicycle, you probably don't pay gas tax. But if you drive a car, you pay gas tax. For the longest time, I fought it, getting a sun pass. So my wife and I drove to Titusville a couple weeks ago to do a job, photography job. And I must have stopped at 20 total traffic. 20.
You counted them, right?
I said, oh man, so I finally caved in and bought a sun pass and charged it up. But I'm watching all the people in the sun pass and just zoom, 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 you know, and also you could ride the free roads, you know. And the biggest myth you're gonna hear is people talk about, I'm against doing a express lane and pay for express lanes because we're already paying for the roads. Yes, you are. Those roads are clogged and congested. So if you want to sit in them free 4 lanes that are all clogged up, you can do that. If you want to pay a little more to ride up a more convenient service, you can do that too. I think we can offer that and still be there. That's what Green Light Notice really was. It was about providing 65% more bus service and an option down the road to have a light rail as part of it. But like I said, the people didn't want to pay for that. That's what's needed. We did the research. That's still needed today.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is we have to get back to providing the services that we provide and maybe at a premium, find some premium stuff we can offer to offset the other stuff. Because we're headed for some lean times that we're going to end up cutting routes. And if you start cutting routes and cutting service, how are you providing service to those customers? Because what are they going to do now, the ones that need it and survive by it, like I did?
Right, right, and we're gonna see that, we're gonna see a number of the ideas that you mentioned as we get over to the
Right.
list over here as well. So let me just check in with you, right? So I just listening to you talk, I've heard you sort of two sort of common themes that you've talked about. One is this idea of focusing on core purpose. You said we sort of run our business, focus, that's our number one priority, run the core transit agency purpose of PSTA, and then I think a number of you talked about this idea of sort of participating as appropriate in the broader transportation conversation. It's not our number one focus, it's not the leadership role piece, we want to be involved in those conversations, but this is where we should be spending our time as it relates to the overall sort of role of PSTA. Does that sound like what you, again, I'd like to, want to hear from you to make sure that that's correct. I'm very cognizant of making, this needs to be your input, I'm just trying to synthesize it, right? Yes, please.
You know, for all of these questions we have here, I think it would be valuable if we could get our vision and our mission statement somewhere up on the screen.
Okay, I can get it. Okay.
Because as I'm going through these, I keep comparing the vision and our mission statement and kind of bouncing them off in my head.
Sure.
How do these questions match up with that?
Okay, yeah, I'll do that.
I don't know,
Commissioner?
obviously, being a new person, not having gone to any commission or board meetings yet, my only statement would be that I'm hoping that the bulk of our time as board members are spent on strategic issues and not the day-to-day operation of the business. I think boards get sometimes wrapped up in that concept of how are we operating, or what are we doing wrong last month or next month? And to the extent that we're taking time out of the board meeting to talk about a strategic issue, and it doesn't have to be the big picture, it can be an item and an area. And I think we need to make sure that we as a board are sticking to that more than you know, which route's doing what. I mean, I think we're losing the forest for the trees. And the only other comment I would make is that, you know, we're talking about the next generation and trying to make sure we understand. And, you know, with all due respect, sitting around this table, I don't see a lot of young, that millennial group here represented. And we had a presentation on yellow lights and how the yellow flashing light to us, folks, is a new concept. And we're used to that solid green light.
Mm-hmm.
The younger people that are going through driver's ed and are 20 years, they don't even know what the solid green means. And we're like talking two different games. They know that solid yellow and what it means, and we're all kind of still trying to figure it out. So, you know, I don't know that we're painting that vision for the younger, and the point about trying to get people to use the systems. So I think that has to be figured in. I'm not saying it answers that question, but it certainly.
Well, I think it's actually a great bridge to the next question here. Councilmember Holmes.
Coming from the newbie table, it's, you know, Mr. Wingate brings up a very interesting point though, but of all the cities that he talked about, they got one thing in common. Those cities are all vertical. And historically speaking, mass transit works in communities that are vertical. When you say Boston, Chicago, New York, I mean, every time I go to New York, only a fool drives in New York. I mean, you have to have some mental deficiency to drive through that city. And it's the same thing in Philadelphia and all the rest of them. Well, Pinellas County is not that. The highest concentration of high-rises in Pinellas County is Gulf Boulevard. That's the highest for residential. Other than that, you've got downtown St. Petersburg. And in downtown Clearwater, you've got some new ones that have gone in. But beyond that, you do not have high concentrations of vertical concentrations of individuals. So I think that's one of the biggest issues, that when you want to get the millenniums using mass transit, A, you have to figure out where they're living in the first place. And then B, where do they want to go? You know, and are they really going to want to take a bus to Ybor City on a Friday night and hope they get out of the bar before the bus stops running? I mean, if you're going to change the thinking pattern where you don't want to spend the $2 or $3 for the gallon of gasoline, have to park your car and things like that, and you don't want to drive home when you're partially inebriated, fine and dandy. That's your client base that you can serve and get them used to doing it. But I think that's one of the problems that has to be overcome is, you know, what communities are they actually living in, and what do you actually have to offer them that would really entice them to use it?
Yeah. Okay. Mayor, did you have your hand up? Okay.
The biggest part, and you touched right on it, and I hear it now, the millennials, when the young people that use the buses. A lot of them work late now.
Yes.
And a lot of them don't have cars. Well, they can't ride the bus, and they can't work late because how are they going to get home? If they work overtime, they got to get a cab that takes a little bit of money that they made away. So that was a huge thing that was in this so-called failed plan. I don't think there's nothing wrong with the plan. We have to find a way to provide for those. We got the information. I think someone said that earlier. We have the data. You know, as Dr. said that. We have the data. We know what the problem was. We just have to find a way, efficient way to take care of that. Like I said, pay for use. If you're going to run late at night, it might be a more premium they got to pay, which is cheaper than a cab. But they'll have a way to get back and forth and they can work. A lot of these young people that we're talking about that's not in the room, someone just said, wants to be able to have the freedom to do that. They don't want a high insurance car payment. They don't want to pay for parking tickets. They don't want to find a parking space. They want to live. That's all they want to do.
Right.
And they want to have options to do that. And right now, they can't.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead, please.
One other quick thing, this question here, PSTA's role in transportation conversation, I think can be summed up in one of our guiding principles, which is expand public transit through educating, partnering, and collaborating with our entire community.
Got it. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Great. Now I'm gonna take these as where we are, and let's move on to the next conversation, which is a bridge, frankly, that I think your comments both got us to, as well as Councilmember Newton's, right? So this is based on what we know about communicating our message clearly and to the right people. Going forward, we should be sure to keep it simple, identify a face to communicate the message. The message was clear. We have a mass transportation problem. Communicate values, not just the technical info. Make sure we know what the key concerns of the taxpayers are and address them. Who are the right people? Identify the right people, clearly together. Explain our mission to the community. Need to tell real people stories. A confused voter, I think this means is a no voter instead of in, but I'm not sure. A confused voter in or is a no voter?
Is.
Okay, that's what I thought. Didn't want
Spell check on it.
That's all right. I didn't want to. I didn't want to put words in anybody's mouth, right? I want to be careful. Yeah, right. The spell check in these markers is not very good. Let's see. While understanding this is a regional issue, we should think more about our message and our service on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis. Micro targeting. We need to understand that if we need a referendum, the right people are the taxpayers. And then a ditto to who are the right people, perhaps key stakeholders, riders, citizens, funding partners, other interested parties. So that was your sort of set of feedback around what is the lesson that we should take from being able to clearly communicate our message to the right people. So thoughts on that in terms of sort of key themes, key takeaways that you see in that regard? What do you think? Please.
My apologies to everybody that I was late, so I missed.
You were not alone.
I missed.
You were not alone.
I probably missed some other dialogue, so if I'm repeating things that have already been discussed, I apologize.
She was in the parade last night and went late.
No, we canceled our parade. I think before we even start communicating our values, we have to build our credibility.
Okay, yeah, that's coming here, yep.
I mean, to me, that's the most important thing.
Okay.
Both internally, how we operate, and externally by the service we provide.
Okay.
And that is a communication worth its weight in gold. You don't even have to, if you're doing your job right, if you are providing good service, if you are doing it in a timely manner, if people feel that they're getting where they want to go, if timing is good, if there are no problems, again, I'll just repeat myself, if people are getting where they want to go, you don't have to do anything to communicate. That is your communication. Communicating is over and above the service, so to me, credibility in our internal and external organization communicates the message we need to do.
Okay. Okay, other thoughts?
And I think you have to start there.
Okay, Commissioner Welch?
I would ditto what Julie said. Providing the best service we can is the best communication. So I wrote that ditto perhaps key stakeholders from the perspective of potential funding partners. For example, if we were to run, the community bus plan has some basic things, but more frequency, later hours, weekends. Those are always targets for us, but also we talked about bus rapid transit on perhaps the Howard Franklin or the new managed lanes that FDOT is talking about. So those are the stakeholders I would think we need to communicate effectively with in order to provide that service to the level that we can for the community.
Okay. Other thoughts?
Well, I think there's a big difference between communicating or marketing our current services and communicating to sell a new idea, such as Greenlight.
Certainly, yep.
I was wondering that, if we need a referendum, the right people to convince are the people that are going to vote, not just the people that are going to ride the bus, because often they don't vote. So a marketing plan is one thing of our basic services, and you're absolutely right, doing your job excellently is the best marketing. But if you're going to ask people to pay an extra tax, then that's a whole different job. And a whole different sales job.
Got it. And so how do you see that playing out going forward for sort of
Well, I think that
for the board and the agency over the next couple of years?
I think there was an issue with people having confidence that PSTA is doing the right job. And maybe that's a marketing thing and maybe it's a real thing, I don't know.
Okay.
But there's certainly a disconnect, or a mistrust.
Okay. Okay. Other thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I think Mayor Buchowski brought up a really good point. I was actually the one who wrote Communicate Values over here. And I think we were really going in the same direction in terms of PSTA has greater legitimacy and support the more that the public understands the public value of what we deliver. And that kind of takes us back to what we had on the board a minute ago about our ability to deliver core services. So I see the core services and the legitimacy and support of being very related. And the third part of that triangle would be our like what I would call like our operational capability. I mean, we have to operate within reality. We have to operate within budget constraints. With Greenlight Pinellas, we went back to the public to say this is what we need for more organizational capacity to provide more services. and now I see the value in this discussion is, did we push our legitimacy? Did we push what the public saw as our public value? And I guess that's what we're going to discuss here today. But I do think it's really important what Mayor Bajowski brought up, is that our legitimacy and our credibility is really so foundational.
Okay. Other thoughts?
If I can add to that.
Please.
I mean, you can relate it to, let's say, a Starbucks. People go to Starbucks because they know they're gonna get great coffee, they know they're gonna get in and out quickly, and they get consistent service. It's a product that they want.
Right.
And they have credibility. I just use them as an example, I'm not picking on them.
There are many other examples of that, where you know what you're gonna get.
We have to provide the best product, at the best price, at the best service, for people to want more. People will desire more if we're doing what we're doing, the base of what we're doing well.
Okay.
But I mean, just to pick up on that a little bit, because I think this is a very good discussion. I think the part of what we're trying to do in this conversation is understand that, we're trying to take your analogy about the Starbucks, we have a county full of people that don't drink coffee, I mean, we can beat ourselves up about I think there's two components to this conversation. One is, given our fiscal situation, how do we continue to provide service to the people that are currently using the service? To Ken's point, focusing on delivering the bus service to the people that need to ride the bus every day. But then there's another part that we're all interested in, which is how do we convince people who don't use public transportation to use it? And I'm not sure that part of the conversation is about people having concerns about PSTA's operational capacity or our on-time performance. I mean, I think if you look at the numbers in terms of how this agency is run, it's run well. I think it's helping people, as Janet said, understand a new culture about, well, I don't have to take my car to go down to the Publix because there's a bus that stops right down the street and I can take that to the Publix. And so it's a harder issue than just, in my mind, it's a harder issue than just, making sure our agency is run well. We have to help people understand that there's another option out there besides just getting in their car for those people that have that option of having a car. And that's why I put down on the communication issue, sort of focusing neighborhood by neighborhood. And I mean, when we were talking a lot about this last year and leading up to the referendum, we talked about these big themes about what enhanced public transit would bring to the region. But if I live in Largo and I'm trying to get to downtown Clearwater, I just want to know how I can do that quickly on the public transit option versus getting in my car. And if it's not real comparable, I'm just going to get in my car.
Got it. Okay. Julie, and then I can see a number of you. I'll get to all of you.
And to respond to that, I hear what you're saying, and I'm seeing it as kind of two things in my mind. I mean, and I'm not the expert, but if you are providing the service to the current users to the best of your ability, when word comes around, if you've got good frequency, decent hours, and you got your base, that word starts to get around. So that's one thing. More people will start to come in that arena a little bit. But then you start to look at, as Mr. Holmes said, where is it people want to go? I.e., we added the North Coastal Route Jolly Trolley. It is extremely successful. It's in North County, which does not embrace public transportation, because we looked at where do people want to go and what do they want to use it for. So as you're getting your base together and providing more frequency on those core routes and getting the base public transportation folks where they need to go, then you're looking at these other options. Hey, and don't everybody laugh when I say this, I want to go to a Rays game, providing the Rays are still going to be there. I want to go to a Rays game, or I want to go to the Phillies for spring training, or the Blue Jays for spring training. Whatever those things are. And you know, maybe it's a matter of thinking a little smaller versus as big as we are. And I'm not saying don't think about the big things, but that's how you win people, baby steps.
Okay, Chair Johnson, and then I'm gonna get to all of you.
I thought the analogy to Starbucks was good on the quality side, but then Mr. Diamond picked up and said, yeah, but what about the non-coffee drinkers? Which really ties to the values, which is that Councilmember Darden was talking about in the, what is the value that we bring to people who are not coffee drinkers, who are not transit drivers? And to explain our mission and using real people's stories just to help them understand that there is a value to them, or there may be a value to them if they better understand our mission as we communicate.
Okay.
I've listened to everything and thought about this real hard. The one thing that I dumped here and I didn't write down is what would happen if we had no public transportation in Pinellas County? Have we ever sat down and figured that out? How would who get to their job or to the raise or to wherever if we had no? So what is our value, Julie, and to whom? And going back, we had, the whole county was covered in either green light signs or no tax for tracks. We're over that. We're not talking about tracks. We're talking about just us. We're in a different ballgame. It's a different day. It's a whole new thing. So what we were attacked on 99% of the time was the tracks, not what we do every day.
Okay. Mr. Newton, and then I'm coming here. I'll get to you.
2 words, record ridership. Record ridership, record ridership. Through this whole campaign was record ridership. And another 2 words, clean audits. They're hard to come by. So as being a good steward of the people's taxes and resources, the audit proves that, beyond a doubt. I was the one that wrote down the message is clear, and we have a mass transit problem. The way I look at it is, we already have a situation, and I got the message clear. People don't want to pay taxes to provide for more. They're already paying taxes on their house. Everybody who voted against it thought it was a bad idea. This day is still paying PSTA taxes. So they're getting taxation without representation as we speak. Everybody who owns a home or a business and does not ride the bus, they're getting taxed for it as we speak. So if we're going to be faced with the financial constraints that we have and forced to provide the service at some level of service, we have to find other ways to generate revenue, vis-a-vis other than asking people to pay tax, or tax themselves. And that's why I keep going back to the express lanes and also to pay for what you want. If Starbucks was a good analogy, but you can get coffee at McDonald's too. That won't cost you $10 and a $20 mug, you know? So, I mean, it depends on how you want to go about doing it, but people pay for what they want. And I was in a sales class and the guy told me, Mr. Newton, people pay for what they want. He said, I'll show you what I'm talking about. You take it to any trailer park anywhere in the country. He said, I'll show you $30 bass boat hooked up to a brand new truck. You know what I'm saying? They don't care about the big houses. They want to look good when they're on the lake fishing for bass. So people pay for what they want. We have to find a way to provide premium services that we can offer to them. The beautiful thing about buses and BRT, you can run it anywhere. If it doesn't work, you can run it somewhere else. And try to pick up additional revenue, pick up additional customers. We have that within our capacity, and I think that's what we should start looking at. And people will pay. You give me a run of premium service that runs to midnight, but it might be 3 times the price of a normal bus. But it's cheaper than a DUI. Follow me if you were coming out of downtown St. Pete at 3 in the morning, you know. As far as people talking about living your life around the bus, I did that on the Hard Line over in 10th. I dated around the bus. It was true love. Because we got something to eat, on a movie, and was on the last bus by 9:30 leaving USF, going back downtown Tampa. And we had our own bus, and just us on the bus, we cut the lights out, and we're riding back toward the garage.
That's a little more information than we need. A little more information than we need. I'm gonna stop you right
But what I'm
there.
getting is, we need to find a way with what the resources that we have to try to generate more revenue.
Okay.
And the taxes, they
Okay.
keep on my tax referendum, people don't want to pay the tax. I was asked this question, how do you provide mass transit with connectivity to Pasco, Hillsborough, and Pinellas? Ain't but one way I see that, and that's managed lanes or express lanes when people pay for it. Because you ain't gotta worry about a referendum. People out there in those cars sitting there
Yeah.
losing 3 hours of their life. All of us get 24 hours, that's all we get. So if you spend 3 hours sitting in traffic each way, that's 6 hours you never ever
Describing
gonna
my
get
morning.
back.
Yeah, right.
I mean, you got 6 hours.
For some of you, that's a little close to home.
Well, you'll never get it back, but that has value. How much is your time worth?
Right.
Matters.
So, or you're sitting in traffic and spraying gas.
Right.
So, some of this stuff, I mean, I think we're going the wrong way. I mean, the tax thing on the house was a great idea, but we're already doing that.
Yeah.
So I think we should look at other options to generate more revenue, to try to offset some of the cuts and the services we're gonna have to be faced with.
Okay.
That's all.
Okay, Mr. Holmes, you had your hand up earlier. Still relevant comment or not?
Well, I was gonna make one comment when Ms. Johnson said it was, no tax for tracks. What was the thing they were after? Was tracks? No, first thing they were after was tax.
Right.
That's what it said, no tax for tracks. That was just the payoff on that, but as
Okay.
far as raising the money, that's the Pandora's box on this whole thing. Where do you draw the line on here? You wanna enhance services on it, but at the other side of the coin, PSTA has, I think it's roughly, 40 routes?
Yeah.
Give or take. And of the 40 routes, you have roughly 8 of them who are virtually overcommitted. They have, more customer base than they have capacity. And then you've got 32 of them that are kind of, is it really worth having it there or not, which is the big judgment call. So if you're not going to raise the tax, which I know you've got more room on the millage, on the property tax.
Not
Yeah,
much, not much, very little.
well, there is
There's
very
$1 million
little, and it's
there.
better to have a little than none. But the other side of the coin, where is the line on here, where you can maintain service to your customer base, and at the same time, when you talk about building another express lane on a road, well, none of us will live long enough to see them build enough roads, going up to Pasco County and whatever. At least us youngsters at this table won't live long enough to see it.
There you go, man.
Great.
It's quite all right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, hey, bumped in there.
I'm probably old enough to be your father, so don't worry about it.
Mr. Scott, and then I'm coming to you.
Thanks. Well, kind of keying off of what Commissioner Newton said here is that if people will pay what they want, if the message is quick, affordable transportation from where you are to where you want to go, it doesn't say need, okay? And it brings me kind of back to that slide we had earlier, want versus need, right? It says where you want to go. Well, then I don't think we're doing a good job of getting that message out. I don't think we did a good job of it. And as we look to take the system as it is now and redesign it or do whatever we're gonna do with it here, okay, to be able to continue it, I think we need to keep that in mind.
Okay.
It's where you want to go.
Okay, Councilmember Rice.
I mean, this is a very light critique, but I actually take a little bit of exception to the Starbucks metaphor, only because I just think we need to be careful when we're a public sector agency, and I get a little bit nervous when we compare ourselves to the private sector. Our public value is rooted in the service that we provide to the public. And because the public, even people who don't use the buses, still think it's important enough, you still vote to assess ourselves the tax to support PSTA, even if you don't actually use the bus. So I think we're more in the business of providing, if we're going to use a metaphor, I think we're more in the business of providing clean and affordable water, not gourmet coffee, because the water is a need. And so not to go overboard on and I know what you were getting at with that analogy, but I don't want to cede the ground that we should somehow have to always think that we have to perform and behave like a private sector business whose bottom line is making profit. I think we need to be clear on who we are as a public agency, and PSTA is one of the most you know, it's one of the cheapest agencies. Our public gets a lot for the dollar. We're very, I mean, I think we're very proud of how we run our services. And if anything, I think private sector sometimes could learn a lot from how we run our business. And by the way, we run our business in a very intensely politicized atmosphere that the private sector, most of the private sector probably does not.
Got it, okay. Commissioner Eckers, go ahead.
Did you need to move on?
No, it's okay. If you
No,
have a comment here, that's fine.
just listening to a lot of conversation, I just, the smattering of thoughts that talked about credibility, and I think one of the things, again, you have a lot of empty buses, and you know, you talk about going to the heart of the credibility of an organization that knows what it's doing. That perception's out there when you talk to folks that say, well, they obviously don't know how to match needs and wants, or supply and capacity, or capacity and demand from the folks. So, and so to that, we're still needing to move people from one place to another, and I think that service has to be different. You can't have a big empty bus up in North County over and over, and people up there think that PSTA have a clue what they're talking about. And so I think talking about the credibility, and it can be, you know, maybe you have a car that drives a certain route instead of a bus. Or, I mean, again, talking about the credibility. And then somebody also talked about no service for me, and you know, that's the expanding it above what we need versus what we want. And the talk has been about what we want, and you know, we have to start identifying that. And you talked about going to a Rays game. I mean, I'd love nothing more than to go over to Countryside Mall, park a car, and take it. And that would expand it to a group of folks that don't currently use it. So I think we've really got to start thinking about, clearly we are a public transportation system that needs to provide certain basic product in certain areas that have that demand. But I think at the same time, we need to start figuring out that, yeah, the Jolly Trolley works on certain routes. And maybe there are cars or vans that would be perfectly suitable, and you could have them looking cool, so even the millennials would say, it's cool to get on there. Look, it's almost full. They've got 4 people in there. As opposed to, nobody uses a bus, I mean, for crying out loud. So I think, talk about credibility, talk about, you know, matching needs and wants, so anyway.
Okay, great, thank you. Mr. Davis?
And to that point, and I was kind of listening to everything, and Commissioner Eggers and Mayor Brzezowski and I are North County, and I said this from the beginning of Greenlight, and I wrote that who are the right people, and what I found, and I've said this over and over again, is that the right people in South County are kind of the wrong people in North County, and we were trying to sell the same message to everybody, where truly North County functions different than Central County and South County, and as you said, although it might not be right, perception as we know it is somewhat reality, and the people that I talked to, and I had a hard time, you know, disagreeing with them, is that, you know, why should we do this? The majority of the buses that I see are empty running around. And to Mayor Brzezowski's point, and to Commissioner Eggers, is in North County, I think the issue is find the need, find what people want. It was the Jolly Trolley, it works for them. You know, to Commissioner Eggers' point, you know, maybe you don't use it day to day to go to work, which I can. I sell real estate. I'm all over the place. It wouldn't work for me during the day. But if on a Friday, if I could park my car and never get in it again, and ride out to Clearwater Beach and spend the night or spend the weekend or go to a restaurant and come home and do that, or as you said, go to Countryside Mall, I think North County, it's probably more leisure use than it is necessity. And I think that's it. You know, the question is, who are the right people and what do they want, you know, throughout the county. That's kind of, that was the perception that I got in trying to convince people that we needed more. And the core message was, I don't know that you're running what you have right, at least not in North County.
Yeah, right, that's sort of, it's the credibility piece, right? The credibility and the service
And
piece
that's
that sort of is a key theme that we hear over and over.
That's
Mayor?
exactly what I'm trying to say, is,
Right.
you know, maybe we don't have a bunch of coffee drinkers, but the coffee drinkers we do have, we need to support them in the best manner possible. And look at what kinds of coffee they want.
Right. Well, I see these two things, I mean, these things are two, you've talked about them in very interrelated ways, right? Sort of, we got to provide great service to our customers, that servicing, full buses, direct, you know, all that stuff, sort of clearly circles back to your overall credibility. Your overall credibility helps you to make sure that you're matching service and people are riding it well, right? They go together. Commissioner Welch, you had a reaction to that.
It all goes back to what Mayor Bojaski said the first time. If we make the service the best, most efficient, most effective that we can, it solves that credibility problem.
It does.
Yeah.
Part of that empty bus perception was created during the debate, but to this day, we still get emails. I think Commissioner Eggers and I were recipients of an email from Mr. Johnson this week, still talking about empty buses in North County. And so I asked him, tell me the route, the date that you saw that. If that is true, then move to a smaller vehicle, and Brad is already looking at that. We've got flex routes with smaller vehicles. We need to reassess everything that we're doing, and all of that gets back to making the service the best that it can be. If you've got, and again, we've talked about every bus is empty at some point. A school bus is empty when it pulls out of the lot. So is ours. So it depends on when you're seeing it. Sure. It depends on perceptions going in. But if we've got a problem, let's deal with it, and that gets back to making the service the best it can be. And that solves a lot of those other problems down the line.
Okay, great. Chair Johnson, and then I'm going to try to wrap this up.
I think Mayor Bevis made a really significant point in that there are different needs. Different people have different needs, and so when someone sees a bus, they perceive it from their needs standpoint, not necessarily from the need that is being served on that route at that time, for instance. The route that doesn't have many passengers during the day, but only runs 3 times during the day or 4 times during the day. So we need somehow help our community understand that we are serving different needs in different ways.
Okay, great.
One quick comment on that to follow up. When I was a kid, you came to Pinellas County and you wanted to go from Pinellas Point down to Palmetto, you had to take a ferry. You had to drive your car out onto the ferry, it took you down there. The ferry went away when the Skyway was built. And yet, yesterday, I saw in the news where the city of Clearwater is cranking up a ferry for the employees who work on Clearwater Beach so they can park their car on the land side and take a ferry across to Clearwater Beach. So you're looking at models based upon the situation. One ferry went away when the bridge went up. Well, the big bridge has gone up out to Clearwater Beach, and yet there's a ferry coming in to solve the problem out there.
Okay. Okay. All right, so I want to check in with you because I've had you in the chairs for quite a while this morning, right? So we're getting close to lunchtime. I'm happy to sort of, okay, we've got 3 more topics to talk through. Some of them we've touched on already, so I think the conversations may move more quickly. This gets a little bit, I think, to the credibility point that you brought up, but we may find that there are other aspects to this as well. So this says, based on what we now know about citizens' perception of PSTA and our service, going forward, we should be sure to be as efficient as possible, streamline operations, evaluate all departments, service customers' needs more effectively and in a more timely fashion, make sure we have the right leadership in place, continue to focus on our performance metrics to ensure that PSTA is operating efficiently and executing its message. Do we understand people's perception and who are the people, riders or non-riders, back to the before, make it about efficiency of service and connecting people to jobs. Transit is not sexy. Choice riders aren't tuned in. Focus on service delivery, efficiency with incremental improvements as fundable, create familiarity with transit, be open, accountable, and ethical, visibly demonstrate project management, and deliver outstanding service to our current customers. So many themes that, frankly, we talked about in the prior conversation certainly come up here as well. So I don't want to move on too quickly over it, but what are your thoughts here? Any new thoughts that come up here, or is it sort of a reinforcement of what we've heard?
It's a reinforcement of what we've been hearing. Deliver core services, the perception, you know, things like that.
Okay.
A lot of the same.
Yeah, I didn't, because it was behind the whiteboard, I wasn't thinking about it, but it certainly strikes me as that way. Mayor?
Well, I would agree with that, and I would say that while we're doing all that streamlining and operating, we want to address head-on some of those comments, like the empty buses, what our internal operations are. You know, there was discussion about maintenance of buses and tires and different things like that.
Right.
all of those internal things that came out during this process, we need to embrace it, face it head on, create new strategies to fix those things. Again, it's about perception.
Right.
More than it is reality, and service the customers' needs that we have today, and look for the holes. I'm not saying don't think regionally,
Right.
but I also think that we have to, we know we have, and I don't wanna get in the weeds, but we know we have a major hole with use by tourists and visitors.
Mhm.
That's a major hole.
Mhm.
You know, that's a hole, that's a user, an existing customer that we can fill. But beyond that, do what we do now, but do it well, and do it impeccably, and I
Okay.
think that's where we need to go.
Okay, great, Mr. Scott.
When I look at those comments there, I think that goes to building the credibility of the project.
Right.
Effective, timely project management. I think that right there is what does it.
Okay, great. Any other thoughts? Again, I don't want to move too quickly. By the same token, I don't want to belabor the themes that we've heard. So I'm checking with you. Okay, great. I want to capture the point you made about project management as an addition to the theme over here, but I'll do that in a moment. Okay, let's then turn our attention to the one, I apologize, it's behind the column, but, so based on what we now know about citizens' reaction to new tax revenue, going forward, we should be sure to update and verify need via updated fiscal forecast, clearly establish need, purpose of new revenues with result to service delivery, answer the questions raised during the campaign. Use smaller buses. Do we need a full percentage? Are buses safe for my mom or daughter? Create local prototype demo line first. What's in it for me? The value to me. Simplify the message. Build, I think this is believability in the tax swap. Not underestimate the power of the anti-tax message. Deliver what taxpayers will support. Focus on incremental improvements that voters support. Citizens indicated they don't mind a decrease in service. Be clear on what's being cut. Give our findings on why we need to support our system. Find out why the bus is needed, what population we serve and why, what happens when we don't serve, such as school, work, food, how much it would cost to take care of our population with no transit. Going forward, work with schools to take part in school transit / teach children and adults to use public transit, environmental issues for single vehicle use. Support FDOT paid express lanes. People will pay for what they want. We should explain the need to increase operational capacity to fulfill our mission as defined and valued by public value. We need to maximize services we provide with current resources. People feel they are taxed too much already, then they will be open to new revenue options. Run what we have better before we ask for more tax from residents to add, or ask for more tax from residents to add more. So those were the themes there. Thoughts, themes that you see, what's your perspective? Okay.
Well, the first couple remind that we need to update our forecast, know exactly what we're working with. I know that's going to be part of the. Where did John disappear?
I'm back here. Sorry,
Okay.
just made a quick note. I'm listening. I listened to everything you said, Ken, I promise.
Walked out of the room.
No, that's it. Yeah, you made a comment, I'm out of here.
The dollars when I'm talking about budget or something.
Right, exactly, yeah. So, yeah,
Well, we need to be
takeaway.
clear on what the resources are.
Get grounded in the reality.
Exactly, how the forecast has changed. Brad knows that the planning committee is waiting for those assumptions that are built into the forecast because there's a pretty steep curve in the expenses and we need to understand all the assumptions that are built into that. So we've got to know what we're working with first and know what the need is. And those 40 routes that we have now, I think even under the new revenue scenario, 2 or 3 of those will cut. But understand what we're working with, and then if there's a need to ask, and most of y'all know that I mentioned the gas tax as a possibility if there's a real need. But there are other revenue sources that we've got the ability to use, including the millage, which is now, even though it's small, Commissioner Holmes, I think it's over $900,000 now available from that millage. So the forecast has changed. We need to understand very clearly where we are in terms of what we can fund even with those existing routes. And then that's the basis for going forward and making any other adds. So to me, that's the most important thing.
Okay. And you said sort of both financial and routes, right? And those they're clearly related to each other, but you're like, look, we just got to understand where we are financially and what that means in terms of where we are from a route perspective.
Absolutely.
Both of those aspects, it's not one or the other. They obviously go together.
They're joined together.
But both are important.
Exactly.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure I captured it correctly. Julie?
I totally agree with Commissioner Welch. Find out what we need first before we make the ask. Where are we financially? And then once we do find that, we need to understand what existing resources are there. Because there is talk about the increased tax, and that was a concern to a lot of people. And so what existing resources are there? And we need to urge our leaders around the county in multiple locations that while they had this support for expanded transportation through Greenlight, they need to ask themselves the hard question, do they support transportation if they might have to give us a little piece of their pie? And I mean, I clearly felt I heard that from the residents, go for what you have now first before you're asking more, and fix what you have first before you try to add. Those were two big messages.
Okay. Councilmember Bryce, did you have something? Okay. Other thoughts on this topic? You had a lot of comments here. Any other thoughts? Chair Johnson?
To me, the one is that I don't think we really talked about in the campaign was, why will my life be better with improved transit system, even though I don't use transit?
Mm-hmm.
Either from the general support of the community, quality of life, attracting millennials, but what's in it for me? Even though, and why would I support a tax increase?
Got it. So certainly, it comes back to this idea of communicating message. Right? What's the value proposition? Clearly communicated. Make sure we understand our audiences. Okay. Other thoughts on this one? Patty?
I put the part in there about the school buses.
Mm-hmm.
And we are a transportation agency. We never question how much we're spending for school taxes, and a huge, how big is it, Janet?
17 million.
$17 million of our school taxes go to transportation for children. I'm not saying to put a 6-year-old on a PSTA bus, but I'm saying that we are transportation. And I do watch yellow buses following PSTA buses or the reverse, stopping at the same stops and doing the same thing. So is that a part of transportation that we need to look at, that we need to share in? Is that part of our transportation dollars that are going awry? And are we teaching? I mean, we do have an environmental impact. And although we don't have vertical cities yet, we sure are close, because we don't have anywhere else to go. We can't go out anymore. We've got to go up. Right, Karen? Right. And so we have a message that we need to be giving. While we can't go out anymore and add all of those more lanes for more cars, the millennials who do use more buses than my age person, our kids need to learn how to use public transportation. If they don't learn now, they're not going to learn. And I just think that needs to be part of our process, part of where we're going.
Got it. Okay.
Well, it's not about, and I'm the one that I keep pushing this first in option, because that's the only way. Hear me, the only way you're gonna get these three counties to work together and connect. As long as you got people and you got factions that are against more taxes, okay, hear me now, you're not gonna be able to get them to approve more taxes, which means you're gonna have more of the same. So you have to find viable options. I mean, the spread plan is a plan, not a perfect plan, but a plan. Because it allows people to pay for what they want. Right now, some people in the room probably have HBO, Showtime, and Cinemax. I don't, I have Netflix. I can't afford it $20 a month. So, but they pay for what they want and what they can afford. When you're looking at transportation options, be it ferries or rail or BRTs or the U-Bird, you know, it's options to get around. And what we're trying to do is, what's happening today and going forward, is find ways to do that. As it pertains to the question about, I think it says reaction to, is that more tax revenue? Or
It's a new tax revenue.
New tax revenue, okay. Right now, I had this discussion with the cameraman in the hallway. He came to me and asked me about, forget about Boston, forget about Phoenix to Seattle. What I was trying to convey to that was that not just poor people ride the bus. When I travel to those cities, I use their public transportation. I don't rent cars because they don't have a lot of infrastructure to put cars, but they do have the buses and rail and whatever else that'll come into those areas. And it works, and that's what they've been using as options. But people do drive cars in those cities also. But what I'm getting at is if we don't provide a funding mechanism to allow the people that's actually using it to pay for it, it's never gonna happen. It's never gonna happen. Referendums are great, but some of the people that are voting and saying they don't want it, they do drive cars. And I submit to you, like I told him out in the hallway, the people in North County pay way more. Look at your tax bill. I bet you pay way more than PSTA right now than I do. I live in South St. Pete. I bet you pay way more than PSTA.
But you have more service.
Look on the taxes. Right. So what I'm getting at is this. If you don't want to try to provide for ways to expand that service and give them more options, then leave it the way it is, that's not gonna change. They're still paying more. Right. So what I'm getting at is, and instead of us trying to get a referendum or get them to pay more in taxes, because we got a limit, we got a ceiling, is to provide more premium options that people will pay for. You got to be RT to that. I said someone hit it on the head. I think it was Brian. If you want to go, you know what I'm saying? I might want to go to the airport. If it's $10, I can get to the airport round trip and back. I do that. I'll pay for that. You know what I'm saying? And if we get enough people paying for it, it'll support itself. It'll be self-funding. The same way with those routes that are probably not as productive as we would think we would like them to be. You know what I'm saying? The whole message I got, the only message I got, was people were against the tax. They didn't want a tax. But they're already paying, because we already paid. The referendum question is say, shall the county levy 1% surtax for public transportation? And the people reading that in the booth saying, I'm already paying for public transportation, this is more tax. Right. Okay, so what I'm saying is, that's the question I got of it. It didn't say anything about they don't want any robust service.
Right, yeah, it wasn't a service
They didn't want to be taxed. To that question. So what I'm saying is, knowing that, as elected officials sitting in this room, we should be looking at other ways to provide premium service within our confines and things that we have control, without looking at getting them raising taxes or getting them out for a new tax.
Got it.
Try to get the people who use it to pay for it. Okay. To pay into it and to pay for the premium stuff that we offer.
Okay. Mark?
Yeah, in the circulars that I got, frequently it said if we don't get an increase in our taxes, we're gonna have to drop the circular, or the amount of bus service that we're giving by as much as 28%. And we said this several times. And so everybody knew that if we don't get this money, we're gonna have to cut the bus service. We also know on the board that we're right now cutting it on our reserves. So everything is going downhill. And what did the taxpayers say? They said, cut them. They don't care. That's what they said.
Okay. Mr. Scott?
What I heard it a little different. What I heard was that you're telling me you mismanaged your fiscal house up to this point, and now you want me to bail you out. I think that goes to the credibility.
Got it.
That's what I took.
Okay, gotcha. Julie, and then I'll come
That's
to Ken.
basically, I mean, I wasn't gonna say it quite that way, but that's basically what I was gonna say.
Okay, Commissioner Welch?
Okay, well, I agree with those statements, but I would again say to Commissioner Dyke that the bus service got wrapped in with the whole rail argument.
That's what I.
And so, even folks that I disagreed with on this, and I remember being at Enoch Davis in a debate, said, well, if it was a half-cent just for bus, or if it was just a separate vote, give me 2 ballot items, one for bus, one for rail, I would support this. I think there's more support for what the core public service of bus service means to the county than we might be suggesting here. So I think that part is separate, but I think it all goes back to we've got to have a rock solid financial projection on where we are, and even to keep the basic service we have now, much less premium service.
Right.
I mean, I believe that to operate BRT, even if we had, free access to the Gateway Express or the Howard Franklin or the managed lanes on 275, that still costs us how much, Greg, to one BRT route? I think it was in the millions of dollars. Am I wrong with that?
No, that's right.
Okay,
Like
so,
$2 or $3 million.
so we don't have money to do that. We don't have money even to keep the 40 routes that we have based on the projections that we have.
Right.
And so that's why revisiting those projections, making sure we've got rock solid data is where we need to start, because even keeping what we have, and again, I'm not as interested, I know we're kind of going back and forth on the referendum and green light, that's not even, that's behind us as far as I'm concerned. How do we keep what we have now for the 14 people that wrote it 14.5 million times last year? And Route 30, we talked about cutting that the last time we went through cuts. And those of us who were here, and there are not many, remember those riders came to our meeting, took time off and came and said, I don't have a way to get to work now. And that's why we added back early morning and late evening service on Route 30, if I'm remembering correctly. Those folks are dependent, and I think as a public service, we have a duty to keep that, as much of that service on the ground as we can. Last time we had, I think, a half-mile option. We had staff say, if you eliminate this route, we want to make sure folks don't have to walk more than a half mile to get to the next bus stop. I think those are the kinds of analyses that we need to go through, because even things like Uber and Lyft, get creative and utilize those services for folks that don't have any other way to get to work. I think that is our mission.
Okay.
So,
Julie, then I'll come to you.
And just adding to the couple of statements that were just made, and not trying to get off topic, but when we talk about these more regional, I hate to use the word premium service, because it's just service, but it's a broader service, it's more regional service. One of the things that I'm just learning, that I've heard from Commissioner Seal in the past actually, is, we have to remember that there is a metropolitan planning organization here that is the regional transportation planning agency. This is not all on us. And I think we've kind of embraced it like it's all on us. However, we also need a strong metropolitan MPO.
Sure.
That's gonna help us lobby in Tallahassee, find resources, and determine what the community's goals are for these broader regional express lanes and all of these things. It doesn't all have to land on our shoulders, and I didn't mean to get off topic, but I've heard it mentioned a couple of times, and to me, I feel like, I'm not saying we shouldn't focus on regional connections, we absolutely should have a great transit to the airport because of how much our economy is based on tourism, that's on us. But the rest of it, let's focus on what we've got in Pinellas County and our own neighborhoods first. Let's get that right first.
Yeah, right. Well, it's an example.
As a basis.
It's an example of, it's not off topic, it's an example of the lesson learned over here about participate as appropriate in broader transportation conversation. But it's not ours it's not our main focus to build the regional transit system. That's not the point, right? But do you have, your example of the airport is a good example, right? Hey, we have a role to play there. Let's play our role, but let's also be focused on what we do. Yeah, got it, Patty?
As some of you know, we just opened the 4th transit center in Pinellas County, in Pinellas Park, yeah. There are more than 200,000 transfers in Pinellas Park, our whole 51,000 people place. And I get to sit out there at times on one of the benches and watch that transit center get used. It's mobbed. And the people there that I get to talk to, and I have this past week, knowing that this was coming up, talked to a bunch of those people and asked them the question, what would you do if this wasn't here? Well, I already am on food stamps, but I don't want to have to go the rest of the way. This is how I get to work. This is how I get to the doctor. This is how I get to go to the grocery store. If this isn't here, I don't know what I'd do. We have a core of over 200,000 transfers right there in Pinellas Park. Think about it. I mean, we're doing an excellent job. We're serving a need, and we need to serve more. And those people can't do without what we already have.
Okay, other thoughts? Mr. Knowles?
Want to go a little step further with Commissioner Welch's comment, and I think it'd be prudent for the PSTA to set up more symbiotic relationships with other transit facilities. I'll give you a case in point, something I learned the other day. I had ordered some checks, and they said they're coming UPS. And I checked it, I waited a few days, and I said, well, where's UPS? And then they said, it's at the post office. And I said, what? That's the deal they have made now, is UPS does the heavy lifting, they drop it off at the local post office, and then the post office delivers it, okay? When you talk about Uber, let the PSTA work out a deal with Uber, let them work out a deal with the local cab companies, whatever it may be, where let the PSTA do the heavy lifting, where they're going to go the distance. Another thing that's going to be happening real soon, Port Tampa's about to expand, and they're bringing in more cruise ships. Plus 1 million mail. But anyway, to set up a deal, let the PSTA work out something with the cruise ship industry there, where we can have the buses that are running from Pinellas County to the cruise ship lines, because that would be a premium service. They just had it the other day, Port Canaveral has just expanded tremendously, more than Port Miami. And you're going to see Tampa's going to be doing the same thing, because the governor's already approved the money to expand the port facility. And there was another thing that came up that Brad and I had discussed, is, there's people in the audience who are not going to call me an infidel, but anyway. I said, I think what you should have done, instead of going for the penny increase, go for ½ cent. But as far as the ½ cent is concerned, work out a deal with Pinellas County and work out a deal with FDOT for a couple of things. Number one, generate some extra revenues where the county can get these traffic signals timed, which is going to be a winner for the driver. Secondly, make a deal.
Thank you for mentioning timing. I was waiting for you to do that.
You knew I was coming.
I knew it was coming. I'm glad Commissioner Steele heard that.
Secondly, make a deal with FDOT to put cutouts for the buses. That there's something that annoys most drivers to no end, and this is also a safety factor. When the bus stops, case in point, East Bay Drive, just west of Belcher Road, where that bus stop is, when that stops to pick up passengers, the traffic backs up across the intersection. And this happens frequently in any concentration where the stops are. And I said, you need to have something like what's on 22nd Avenue North on the south side of Tyrone Mall, where you've got the cutout there where the bus can pull in off the road. You're not blocking the traffic. It's safer for your customers. It's safer for the drivers. And when they're done, that's your ingress and egress for your passengers also. I think you can get the money from FDOT to do that. You can't put it everywhere, but where it can be put it in. You've just now made a winning situation for the public in general. Thank you, sir.
Just on Commissioner Holmes' comments, what you just talked about, well, the cutouts, I love the idea of the cruise ship thing, but to me, that's the same as the airport.
Right.
And that serves our economy.
The targeted value-based.
Yes, our tourism here in Pinellas County directly. But the cutouts, see, that was the thing. The green light penny was gonna pay for all of that. That's what part of that was. And as I mentioned some time ago this morning, this is where these partners, FDOT, the county,
Right.
MPO, and whomever else maybe municipalities, are gonna have to step up to the plate financially and help support what we're trying to do if it's gonna work, because we can't do it all on our own.
Okay, other thoughts? Commissioner Johnson?
Just particularly focusing in on this, I don't think that it's all PSTA's fault.
Mm-hmm.
That in retrospect, comparing the campaign to what happened in other places, other places were far more successful in their campaign because they did a better job of communicating to the public.
Right.
So I think the message that we've heard here is that rail came clearly across, that people didn't understand, couldn't justify the rail tax for rail. And I don't think the campaign really focused in on, well, what is the core user, the interested user, and we just added that 28%, up to 28% cut. And one of the last things, but I don't think the campaign really focused in on that. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I got you. Okay. Well, and so frankly, that's a good transition to the next topic if we're closed with this one. So let's go there, right? So this is based on what we now know about citizens' reaction to new modes such as rail, BRT. Going forward, we should be sure to ensure understanding of how it will work here, including the first and last mile. We need to depict how it would impact existing road traffic. Would it make my commute in a car longer? Why is it a better solution to congestion? Accommodated clearly in future plans, but not retreat to small ball planning efforts, i.e. we need to continue with a strong vision, know whether it was the modes or the tax that people voted against. Modes, BRT and rail, transportation options were not the problem. People didn't want to be taxed to pay for it. We should provide a problem-solving, pay for use, like express lanes. Establish accurate ridership projections and cost projections. Establish partnerships, FDOT, cities, P3, for funding cost-effective BRT projects. Focus on incremental and attainable goals to increase transportation options in the county, and think more regionally, recognizing that as a region, we are competing globally, and make sure the dollars for the mode meets the needs and wants of the community. So many themes there that we've heard in many of the other lessons. Any particular takeaways from this one, or key lessons that we need to make sure we take away here before we complete the exercise?
It kind of ties together with the previous one, was that, not to keep saying what failed with Greenlight, but the takeaway that I got in North County is a lot what Commissioner Welch said and Mayor Brzezowski and everything else, is that the message that I heard was that the majority of the people, whether they used it or not, thought that we needed an improved transit system. And as you said, and you can dissect it a couple different ways, whether it was a half cent they might have gone for improved bus system, or if you took the rail out of it, but they definitely agreed, whether they used it or not, that they wanted that. And I don't know that, and I think what we're talking about too is a funding source, as Commissioner Welch said, and we've talked about all day, is, you know, the MPO, the DOT, and, you know, those, and we also need to empower those people. T-BARTA has been around for a long time, and, you know, we gave them a mouth, but they were never given any teeth to do anything, or no authority to do anything.
Right.
And that's again on a regional basis, but I think what we heard was that that they want an improved transit system. We missed the bus, so to speak, on getting the taxpayers to do it. So now we need to provide what they said they wanted, but we got to find the funds to do it.
Okay. Okay. Other thoughts? Chair Johnson.
I go back to the discussions where we had talked about the mode and the selection of light rail. And I don't know how many others here were in the room where the ACP was, or the PAC, whatever it was called, talked about the mode. And there was a selection made very quickly, probably in less than a half hour, that we needed to go to light rail because it would spur economic development. In retrospect, that may have been the right decision, but it sure wasn't given very much consideration. And the normal FTA process doesn't include the selection of the mode that early in a decision. And so we just may have shot ourselves in the foot by making that decision so quickly.
So early.
And
Got it. Okay. Well, again, go ahead, Commissioner Welch.
Since we do have reporters here, I'm gonna disagree with my chairman a little bit, because I was on that committee. It was because of the higher economic development of light rail.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a quick decision, in my view. We looked at several scenarios, specifically of BRT versus light rail, and what that would mean for long-term economic development around those stations. So I have a different recollection. It was not a quick decision. But it was a decision that set our path going forward. But it was based on that higher economic development value. Again, that is history.
Right.
And moving
Going forward, what's the takeaway?
Yeah, moving forward, if we are going to look at BRT, and I've said publicly that rail is off the table for me for the foreseeable future. It's not our core mission for PSTA. But BRT could be a part of it. But even there, you've got funding issues. We got to be rock solid about the ridership, who's going to ride BRT from point A to point B, and all that gets back to having rock solid data to base that decision on.
Yeah.
So if BRT is the future, we've got to have solid information to work on and a way to fund, even if they build the lanes and fund some of the capital for the BRT buses, we've got to fund the operations costs.
Right.
We don't have a way to fund that right now.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Any other thoughts here? Commissioner Wong?
I just have, well, I agree with parts of everything that Chair Johnson and Commissioner Welch, parts of what they said.
Understood.
But the piece that I think we shouldn't lose sight of, long-term, and by long-term, I'm talking, a decade or more, is because even the Florida Department of Transportation, in their long-range planning, is planning that envelope on the new northbound side of the, of Howard Franklin. So at some point, and we know that the Tampa International is gonna bring their people mover. I don't know, is light rail the same thing as a people mover? 'Cause I just love that people mover thing. I mean, they're gonna bring that right down to the hub, the intermodal hub at West Shore. So it kind of makes sense for us to think about if when we're talking the long-term picture, not to lose sight of that, because, as I've heard so many times in all of the discussions since I've been on the PSTA board, we're sitting here today having a conversation how to move forward, but I'm telling you, 5 years from now, the whole conversation is gonna transition to something new. We don't even yet know what it's gonna be 5 years from now.
Right.
The world is moving so fast, things are changing so quickly that, 5 years from now, we could be talking about jetting around like the Jetsons did.
Well,
or Flintstones.
Yeah, or even just a pragmatic example of, sort of a year ago, rail was much more part of the conversation than it is today and will be for the foreseeable future, right? It's an example of, the conversation of today is different than certainly the conversation that we expect in the future.
But even the conversation then, John, that rail piece
Right.
wasn't expected to kick in for 20
Right,
years.
it was long range, right. Yeah, great point, yeah, I see it. Okay?
Okay.
Yes, I'm along the same side. We took a trip with Congressman Micah down to Miami. Ms. LaCanter went with us, and Brad went, and some NPO people. And we saw, because of everybody heading in the same direction, the same mindset on work, we saw not one, not two, $3 billion projects coming out of the tunnel, intermodal center, and the Sunrail and the express lanes that they had done. And we saw the benefit of going the same way and looking at all those options. I attended the governor's announcement on Monday over at Tampa Airport, Mr. Joe Cantor. He announced that we had 94 million, visitors that came to the state. He also, they were displaying the new expansion. I think it was, they got forget what's like 198 million or something from the transportation funding from the state, that they're, for this first piece that's gonna go out to the intermodal center, the next piece will go out to the west area that they were talking about, the connect. We, as a transportation organization, that's what we are, cannot revert back into a silo because of the outcome of a referendum. We have got to get more creative and stay a part of the conversation. While BRT and all those other forms are great, they're also subject to traffic, accidents, you know, whatever conditions.
Right.
Only thing I saw stop a rail was something on the rail. Other than that, it zooms right by. It makes a more productive commute, it's quicker, it's a lot more efficient, and people will pay a premium to ride on that. So, since we can't have the rail, the short-term goal should be to try to offer those premium services that people will pay for. I mean, if you announce you got buses running in the TIA, I'm pretty sure they'll fill up quick, fast, and in a hurry. Because people want to have those options. I mean, they don't want to drive over there, have to find somewhere to park, pay arm and a leg for parking, try and get back, and wonder when they're going to get back and forth. I mean, they're bringing millions of people into the city, I mean, into the area every day. And we survive our people, new customers. So we have to provide those services to bring them out there and take them to our big hotels on the beaches or downtown St. Pete or anywhere in North County. So we have to get more back. Like when I talk about providing premium services, people will pay for it. They will pay for it. But the taxing way, I think, is going to be an argument long to come. Long to come. I mean, everybody hates paying taxes.
Right.
I don't see getting around that. But at the same time, if we revert back into a silo and say what we're not going to do and start playing, I think, someone productive small ball, then we're not going to be able to move the conversation and be a part of it as it moves forward. We had a setback, and we learned from that. But now we should be very, I could say, strategic on how we move forward. That's all. And there's other options. Like I said, transportation need, I put down the mass transit need is still there. So with that being a thing, people will pay. They will pay.
Well, so I'm going to, I think it's the point of the conversation where I'm going to use Commissioner Newton's comment as an opportunity to just sort of pull up and say, so let's just talk about and recap the key themes that we've talked about this morning, right? And I want to just check in and make sure that we've captured those correctly, right? And so you've talked about that we got to focus on core purpose, the transit agency nature of what we do. We have to participate as appropriate in the broader transportation conversation, but our primary focus should be on our core purpose around our transit agency. That sort of great service is really the best communication of value. You've talked about really effective project management, dealing with sort of the empty bus perception versus record ridership, different people having different needs, and we got to make sure that we match those effectively to be able to deliver that service, and credibility is really required to be able to communicate. Now there's a clean audit piece in here too that's sort of a different organizational credibility aspect of it, but these two certainly go together in terms of a foundational set of lessons, right? And then you talk about the idea of, look, we've got to get really well grounded and clear about our current situation, and that's true on the terms of the financial strategy, what are our existing resources. We also have to make sure we're very well grounded and clear on what is our service, our route situation, and what is our service delivery right now. And then finally, sort of any incremental service has to have a very clear and compelling value case, right? We've got to be very clear and compelling in terms of this is what we're doing and why. So all the examples you talked about some targeted places where you might have opportunity, this lesson would apply. So those are sort of the key lessons that I've just sort of captured as we've talked through that to try to synthesize this all together. Is that an accurate reflection of your thoughts and beliefs? Commissioner Welch?
If there's no objection, I would just add to the last bullet and funding source.
Yeah, that's key.
Gotcha. Okay.
Actually, I think that's key overall, because both Pinellas and Hillsborough County have failed miserably to do it locally. I mean, I think, we're obviously planning a trip to Tallahassee, and I think we need to prove to Tallahassee that, the regional area can play well in the sandbox. We just can't fund it, and we need, I mean, that's how you get state money and federal money is to collectively work together, because we've proven that the taxpayers locally don't want to do it. I mean, I think that is a key.
Okay. Okay, great. I just wanted to check in with you before we transition to lunch to make sure that the key themes that we tracked throughout here were, you know, an accurate reflection of the synthesis of the key lessons. I'll turn that into a slide and a takeaway for you. We'll obviously capture all of the detailed feedback as well. So none of what you see here is going to be lost. I just wanted to check in on the core themes before we transition to lunch. Chair Johnson, it looked like you had something you wanted to add.
It just, on Mayor Beavis' last comment, because if we have to go to Tallahassee because the local folks don't want to fund it, I'm struggling with how the Tallahassee will fund something that our local folks don't.
True, but they have resoundingly said that they want improved transportation. They want all of these things, but I don't think, again, the burden is on, I don't think the burden is on PSTA singularly to do that.
They don't want increased taxes to do it.
Right.
It's a value case, I think. Right. That, is there a different value case to be made for these supplemental services versus the whole package?
Right, right.
And
Yeah,
there probably is a different value.
right, I mean, you've talked about a number of examples of where you might apply this particular learning, right? Whether it's an airport route, whether it's a specific pay-for-service route, whether it's connection to you know, small neighborhood type routes, right? You've talked about a number of examples of where you might do this, not in a great big huge package all-encompassing way, but if we're going to head down any service, we're going to have to make sure we're clear. It's a clear case, there's a compelling case, and it includes a funding source to be able to learn from what we took away from our most recent experience. Commissioner Newton, then I'll come here.
I think Commissioner Beavis is dead on it. When we went down to, I don't know if you went with us or not, Bill.
Yes, I was on
If you remember, when we had the lunch break, when we went out to the airport, and it was in a huge conference room, and Congressman Mike had every organization, from environmental to NPO to the transit to law enforcement to the different municipalities, everybody was around the table. Everybody had one mission, going in one direction. So he's dead on it. That's how he got that money. And that, and the federal funds and state funds. That's how you draw down that amount of money. You were there, you saw it. What we have now is fragmentation. We still have that. You go to some of the NPOs, I mean, when I was on Tampa Regional Planning, the biggest problem we had, everybody had 10 number one. Every city had a number one. But no one had an idea of how we can get to this, and then we can go to get together and go get this, and get together and go get that. It was always, I want mine now first. And what that does help money go to the place where people are in unison and moving in the same direction. That's how they get the federal money. And I was badgering, if you were there, you saw me badgering Congressman Michael all day long at every event, every place we stopped. And he kept saying over and over again, you have to get the stuff together, you have to be focused, and then the funds will flow.
And to that point, 25 years ago, I've been involved in transportation on the engineering side, 25, 30 years. And to that point is, the joke was, you know, you would take a train over the Howard Franklin Bridge and you'd have to stop at the top and get off and get on the Pinellas one because they couldn't agree on the type of transportation they wanted. And that's, I mean, you know, right. We've got to swim up the river together.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, you had a comment you want to make.
Just one. To Ken's point, I think that the opening of the PSTA Transit Center in Pinellas Park was the best example of where we might be able to go, which is that shopping center gave the property and the place to do that and built it and rebuilt it. And number two, Pinellas Park gave $100,000 towards that project. And PSTA did the rest. But I'm talking about the city gave, which Julie's talking about, the land, the property owner, the public or whoever, private sector, that's what I was trying to get out. And PSTA made a three-way partnership.
It was a partnership, right?
It could be a 4 or 5-way partnership.
It was a 3 Ps, public-private partnership, and we covered that down in Miami too.
But what Julie is talking about is state, feds, NPO, cities, PSTA, and whomever.
You gotta see that everybody's involved.
Just like the North Coastal Route, the North Coastal Jolly Trolley is paid for by a number of governments.
Right, yeah, it's a partnership, right?
Yeah.
Commissioner Welch?
And in both those examples, what was clear from the start was we established a need.
Right.
Yeah.
Clear
And in
need,
Pinellas
clear
Park,
case,
the need
funding
was
source.
a restroom
Yeah.
issue. But once we established a need, then the value proposition was natural, and then you got partnership.
Right.
And one other thing we saw down in Broward was the 595, I think, BRT project is funded by FDOT. Part of the capital funding came from FDOT. So
Right.
why can't we get the same kind of BRT funding for our projects?
Okay, all right, great. Any other comments before we draw to a close? Again, I will capture all these themes in one place and take care of all the documentation. I just wanted to check in with you on the key themes before we close.
On that BRT funding, it goes through multiple counties too.
Right.
It's stuck in Pinellas. So there again, like to this point, it goes to the top of the bridge. I mean, it's got to go somewhere. So you have to find ways that we can get all these kinds of play, well, go the same direction. Taxes ain't one of them. The New York Charter she was talking about, I'm going to raise taxes on anybody for that. But it's successful. So there's ways we can do it. There's funds out there, it's just that everybody's got to.
Okay. Okay, all right, so it is 10 minutes after 12. We have two items left. One is a short conversation around core purpose that frankly I think will just help to distill some of the conversation that we've had already this morning. And then we'll spend the bulk of our time this afternoon talking through. As you can see, we've got a bunch of maps up here. You'll see some slides that also talk through that as well. What we want to do is talk briefly about this idea of core purpose. And so there's a whole bunch of ways we could have this conversation. We've picked sort of a simple way to try to just get a lay of the land in terms of where people are, right? And so you could, just like we did the continuum on needs and wants, or you could draw a continuum where on one end is sort of pure public service, right? So that's essentially enabling people who can't otherwise get there to get where they need to go, right? For jobs, for doctor's appointments, for sort of critical items. People who otherwise couldn't get there, we're providing a public service to enable people to get to the fundamental stuff that they need, right? On the far opposite end of that continuum, you could think of it as sort of transportation as an economic driver, right? That essentially, where the objective is to provide the best transit options to enable economic development, right, vitality of the economy, and quality of life, right? So I'll get the slide up in a second. But the idea is, right, at the two ends of the spectrum, one way to think about this is public service, enabling people to just meet basic needs that they have no other option for how they could get where they need to get to. Far opposite end, it's all about driving economic vitality and sort of providing quality of life. And the core purpose of the agency is to drive that, right? So, admittedly, there's a whole bunch of places you could land on this continuum, okay? And I get that we could talk for 30 minutes and build out a whole bunch of additional descriptors. I'm going to suggest to you that's not going to be valuable use of our time, right? What I do want you to do is to just think about this continuum, and if you thought about the core purpose of PSTA, right? It's different than what we asked you before about sort of how are we accomplishing mission, right? Just if you thought about what is the core purpose of the agency, where would you put your X? Okay? And what I want to do is, I want to give you all a chance, while I'm figuring out how to get the projector back to work, to come up and make your X. And I'm not sure where this is going to go in terms of whether we'll all be closely clustered, whether we'll see a wide range of core purposes. But I do want to get to the surface. Just what do we think about the core purpose of PSTA? Because it will guide where we head. If we're closely clustered and we think that matches current mission, well, that takes us down one road. If we're in a very different place, it takes us down a different road. If it's widely clustered, that may talk about the need to clarify core purpose, okay? So, again, admittedly, a very simple continuum, but I want to flesh out the discussion. Commissioner Long.
What do the last two sentences on the right say? Enable what?
Provide the best transit options to enable economic development and quality of life.
Thank you.
I'll let you interpret the results, not me. What do you think?
Mostly a third to a half.
Yeah, so it's to the left of the middle, for the most part, right? You got some folks right in the middle, sort of some folks on the left side. Interestingly, we do have folks that are sort of at the outliers. Any perspective? Thank you, BJ. You're the man. Thank you very much. There, you can read my handwriting now. Right. So to the left, some smattering across the left, but a pretty, right here, pretty tight grouping of folks that say, hey, we're more of a public service than we are economic driver from the middle. Anybody on the ends want to articulate why they, sort of what their point of view was there? Dave?
Yeah, I was on the left side only because I feel like we don't really get choice riders, and we get people that really need the service. That's who we target, that's who we get, and that's what we are, for the most part. And it, gets to a question that I'd asked you about, and then asked somebody else about the number of riders. It'd be interesting to know the kind of riders that we're actually getting in areas of our county, not numbers of trips.
Right.
But the number of different distinct riders.
Distinct users.
Users of the service, so that we can really start to drill down as to the kind of service we need for an area.
Okay, got it. Other thoughts, particularly from those that were on the far right?
I think the key thing is follow the whole logic behind the Green Light program, and you read Trudeau and some of the other commentators. Part of what will allow us to become more than a beach community and grow employment so not everybody is waiting tables or cleaning hotel rooms is we have to have large employers, quality employers. It's unfortunate Mayor Beavis left because his city's got some of that. But we have to develop the ability to compete effectively with the rest of the country for high-quality employers. And an economic driver for people who are looking to locate is a good integrated transportation network. And right now, we don't have that.
Okay, so that's, you're talking like where we are now versus where we need to go.
Where we need to be.
And that's why you went.
That's right.
And I said where we are now, so.
Yeah, right, that's not necessarily.
Where we are now.
Where we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought too.
So
that's okay. That's why I wanted to ask about some different points on the continuum, right? Is we've got a little bit of mixed metaphors. That's okay, Commissioner.
I was the purple X, and I think that's where we are now. We service a lot of employment centers. Home shopping's huge. People can't work late, so they gotta hire additional staff and train them because the staff they got can't work beyond the bus hours. Also, quality of life, if someone can get a little bit more hours or get access to better employment, they can lift themselves up out of the poverty, and we're doing that right now. I submit to you, we're doing all that. We're currently doing all that. We just gotta find a way to continue what we can going forward.
Gotcha.
But we do all that right now.
Gotcha. Okay. Got it. Thanks. I just wanted to hear from those folks, right? Go ahead.
And I think about the tourists. I don't know where they fall in, but we do a bunch of them riding too.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
I'm a little colorblind. You said you were the.
There's two of them. There's an orange one and a purple.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's okay. It's the problem with a whole bunch of different color markers.
So it's interesting, not that it's in rooms, but.
Please.
I could right dead center of where I thought we were right now. And the reason I did that was because I do think we are a public service agency, doesn't mean we can't improve. And I do think we are providing some economic driver, some. I just don't think we're the best we can be in your area.
Right, not as much, yeah, gotcha.
So that's why I did right in the middle. So I mean, that was my perspective.
Great. Ken?
Well,
Do you feel like I graded us too well?
I'm trying to remember our chair is colorblind, I think he said. So. I'm the blue X, which is towards the left. And I did that based on the community bus plan, which really shows we serve two different groups of people. The bulk of the folks on the big route
70% of them make less than $25,000. And most of them don't have a car or even a driver's license. For those folks, this is their public transportation. This is their
This definition.
transportation, right. But on the flip side, the data on the trolley folks, 47% of them make more than $50,000 a year. So we are serving two different groups of people, the bulk of whom are the low income folks.
Got it.
So that's why I kind of didn't go all the way to the low.
Yeah, that's why it's not here.
Right.
But it's somewhere in here.
I was
There's a number of you that were
more
sort of in
generous
this, number of you that were in this same space. Anybody else want to offer their perspective on it? Again, I thought it would be a useful exercise just to flesh out where you are, mostly as a way to surface the discussion points that you've just had about sort of what is it that we do, as a way to really frame up where we started at the very beginning of the day, which is, hey, our focus is on our core purpose, transit agency. This is a way to talk more about that, right? Any other thoughts or comments? Mayor?
I also, just from a conversation perspective, I think we all have maybe some varied ideas of what economic drivers really are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I say, to me, Councilmember Barkley spoke about high-paying jobs and attracting employers here. That's one economic driver.
Right.
In my head today, right now, in PSTA, I can't even go there. But what I can think about is the #1 industry in our county, besides governmental agencies and hospitals,
Right.
is tourism.
Got it.
And so that's something we can it's something we can more easily support maybe in our current financial system, or, versus the high-paying jobs and the fast routes and all of that stuff.
Right.
So that's two different focuses on what's an economic driver.
Sure. Well, I mean, Commissioner Newton's point about, look, we're driving economic development for that group of folks that can't otherwise get to a job, right? So it's another example of, is economic development enabling people to get the jobs? Is it high-paying jobs? Is it tourism? I get all of that, right? Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Long.
Well, another example of an economic driver, if you look at all the other transit systems that we have, is the enormous economic development that thrives up from where your transit stops are. That currently, where we don't have any, and had we had the opportunity to have a better and more robust system, you would have seen a lot of new enterprising businesses.
Yeah, transit-oriented development.
Yeah, and as we go through the new iteration of the comprehensive plan for the county,
right,
it's all based on transit-driven density and walkable and sustainable communities.
Got it. Okay, great.
If indeed that the tourist industry is the major driver of income for Mills County, then do we look there for income to run our transit system?
Possibility.
I mean, they have, if they're the biggest, but then.
And frankly, I mean, right now, I can tell you right now, that people would pay more to get on that trolley than the $2 they're being charged right now.
Well, whether they would or would not.
Oh, they will.
They have a bed tax.
Well, we got that too, but there are limitations on it.
Well, I understand that, but what you're saying is that's the biggest buck in the county.
Right. And so what I did want to do with this conversation was try to problem solve it. That's not the point, right? And so, but I think what we have surfaced here is, right, there's a number of different enablers, right? But in general, what you're saying is, look, we're focused on providing that transportation service as a transportation agency, but not purely just a governmental service, right? We're trying to drive economic value exactly where you would focus in to drive that economic value. And frankly, based on your current resourcing, you're not going to get even, you're not sort of on the right side of middle. We're on the agency side of the middle, where this is the primary focus, trying to do this where we can across a number of different drivers. We don't need to problem solve in order what drivers you do. That frankly, that's work for you to do in the future. I just wanted to use it to clarify, are we all in the same place? Or are we thinking about this pretty similarly? There was a hand over here. I think. Maybe it was just somebody stretching.
I was saying, one thing you did me about is the student population. We have partnerships with City of St. Pete, which has probably 2,800 employees who show their ID and ride for free.
Yeah.
We have USF St. Pete, who has 6,000 students in our downtown core, and also St. Pete College.
Got it.
That utilize the system also. And those are the millennials that are pursuing their higher education, you know, to be able to have access to a higher education. They're using the system, because they don't own cars.
Okay, okay, great. Chair?
Another potential driver would be personal time. People that want to use their time in commute for something else.
Right, got it. Yeah, well, and some of that gets to the quality of life pieces as well, right? Sort of, you know, if it's a great place to live because of these things, that drives economic value, right? Okay.
Okay, I don't want to belabor the conversation. I did want to,
Based on the interview themes and frankly the discussion from this morning, I thought it was a useful way to let's just see where we are. Is there clustering? Is there not? You know, we've interpreted the X's differently. That's not a problem. It sounds like there's a pretty core picture that says we're more a public agency than we are an economic driver. We want to be selective and thoughtful about where we can create economic value, but not lose track of the fact that this is sort of where our core purpose lies. Great. Again, don't want to belabor it more than that, but I thought it was useful to talk about. Okay, with that, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I think that the point is that we'd also like to maybe move it that way a little bit.
Right.
Or at least, from my perspective, I was thinking about where we are now.
Yeah, there's a desire to move up that chain.
Yeah, move it that way.
But recognition that there's significant pressure going the other way.
Because it's like core service, as you said.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, great.
I'm sorry, I have to add something.
Please.
At some point, maybe it's not in today's discussion, but I think where we are today and in our near future, I think we as a board, and maybe in conversation with the county and FPO, we do have to decide which is our immediate focal point if economic drivers are a part of the conversation. Which one of those drivers should be our immediate focal point? Where can we get the biggest bang for our buck quickly?
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, that needs to be, everybody needs to be on the same page with that, and I don't think that exists either.
Yeah, I think that's
Just to
fair point. Yeah. Well, and so I think there's a conversation that actually is the conversation we're going to have next. It may even come before that one, which is, you know, to Commissioner Eger's point, right? Sort of, you know, ideally we'd like to move this way, but we have some very real financial realities that are moving us this way. And so let's get grounded in what those are and what choices we have to make as it relates to that before we sort of circle back and go this way, right? Ultimately, you're sort of talking about how do we make a move this way and then ultimately turn it back that way. But this one comes first before you can do this one based on your current financial situation. So I hear what you're saying, Mayor. I think this is what we're going to talk about next. Eventually, you'd certainly like to talk about that. And the truth is, you're going to talk about these, you're just talking about in the opposite direction, right? We're going to give up, pull back service. Where do we try to minimize the reductions in that ability to drive economic value? Ultimately, you'd like to be adding economic value. What you're trying to do is minimize the takeaways, right? So the principle holds, absolutely. So with that, I'm going to turn it principally to Brad and his team. They've prepared as we said, the objective here, right, was to sort of clarify and level set around what the future options look like. And so they're going to walk briefly through a few slides that essentially talk about the maps here to just clarify some future options. We're going to give you a chance to get up close to the maps and sort of see what the implications of those are. And then, again, remember what we're trying to do here is we're not making the decision on which scenario we're headed down. That's not the point of the conversation. It is about getting a good understanding of what those various options are so that we can surface what's the information we need to be able to decide. It's essentially, what's your direction to Brad and his team that says, I'd like to know X, Y, and Z so that I can make an informed decision about what's going to happen with these options, okay? So first step is just let's make sure we understand them. And that's the point. We're going to talk briefly about them. You'll have a chance to look at them. We'll ask any questions you have, and then we'll talk about the what info do you need piece. Okay?
Quick question. You all did some interviews prior to today. Maybe you talked about this before I got here. And you had different questions you asked each of us. And I thought the idea was to bring those questions and the different responses. Have those been kind of pulled together, and is that something that we can get a hold of?
Yeah, I'll be happy to brief you that one-on-one. We started with those themes this morning, and it really led to the design of this session.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but I'll be happy to make sure you get them. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Okay. Good afternoon. I am going to be just as brief as John has been. We had a lot of discussion about whether or not I would have a major role in this workshop, and I think it's been appropriate for me to be in listening mode and to provide the opportunity for you, the PSTA board, because that's rare. And even those who have not been to many board meetings know that at a regular board meeting, it is there's less opportunity to talk about some of these high-level issues. So believe me, myself, the PSTA staff that's here are listening and hearing what the board's sentiment is on these issues. The way we're going to use this information is to drive our short and long-term budget planning processes, planning on what we present to you over the next several months and how we move forward. That's how this is actually going to become real, is when I come back to you with the recommendations on the FY16 budget coming up and then and beyond. To Commissioner Welch's comments, certainly we need to show you the assumptions that we are using. And all these maps that I'm about to talk about, they have a whole bunch of assumptions there that are not up here, but that's the first step in our process. That's the plan for the start of the budget process in March. Is we have a new idea, well, to copy the Pinellas County method of showing all the assumptions in one document that you're going to see in March. So that being said, I would like to say that while I am in listening mode to the PSTA board here, I think reflective of Commissioner Welch's comments also, that there's some media in the room. I'm not necessarily taking that there's a lot of facts being thrown around in here. There's a lot of liberties, I think, being taken with things, but I understand it's not necessarily the relevance. I would maybe take a little bit of exception to Commissioner Johnson's comment, Chair Johnson's, about the rail being decided in a half hour. That is not accurate, I would say. Commissioner Steele and others, Jeff Danner back there, can attest that there was many more than a half-hour discussions on that. The other comment I would make is one that Mr. Dighton made about our financial forecasts, our financial plans, all pointing in the wrong direction. That's actually not true. PSTA has been running a financially responsible organization all along. PSTA has never used 1 penny of reserves to fund its system. We have had a balanced budget, and it's not just a balanced budget. We have actually increased our net income each year since 2006. We have increased our reserves since 2006. Managing the system we've got, all while increasing ridership, all while increasing service, all while increasing focused on the customer to get them better amenities like bathrooms and real-time information and free Wi-Fi, all those while still being one of the, if not the lowest cost operations in the United States. Now, we have some issues forecast in the future, mainly on buses, on replacing those buses. And that is driving us. We tried to hit a home run with Greenlight, and that was unsuccessful, about dramatically moving us forward But that does, I don't think that reflects necessarily on where we are today. But we are looking to the future here, and that's what these maps portray. We are open, any idea is a good idea. Again, as John said, what I want you to do now, after I quickly just run through describing what you're going to see here, is for you to tell John in about 10 minutes what other information, or what information you need from me, from PSTA, over the next 6 months to a year or whatever, to help you decide where you're at, where you want PSTA to go with these scenarios. So let me just quickly describe these maps. There are 3 stations, and we're going to have staff, when we break here in just a second, we're going to have staff there to answer any questions or to take any comments you might have down about the maps. Over on the left-hand side, my right-hand side, is the no new revenue scenario as the board approved 2 years ago, shown in a bunch of different maps. Again, you recall that we did we talked about it, a community bus plan as part of the Greenlight plan, developed a new way to realign the services of PSTA. None of the scenarios that across the room here keep PSTA the way it is today. Almost every single route in the system, under any scenario, changes to try to be more efficient, reduce the number of empty buses that are operating, get more people on the bus, get them more directly to their destination as fast as possible, to be competitive. All of these proposals do that. The no new revenue scenario, for those of you who were on the PSTA board, you recall, actually was 2 scenarios. And those 2 scenarios were sort of extremes. And the maps that are over there show the 2 extremes. One was called the core scenario, and one was called the coverage scenario. Both of those assumed that we would have a fiscal cliff that we're talking about, or not necessarily, I think that is maybe inappropriate terminology, that we would have to have less revenues in the future. And so they do reflect an overall reduction in service, about a 29% reduction in service. In the middle, right behind me, is what we're calling the service realignment option 1. That's a nice governmental bureaucrat term. This is essentially if we are able to look at ways to reduce expenses, to try to work, quote unquote, to where we are today. Find new revenue sources, cut expenses, still realigning, sort of maintaining the overall level that we have today, but in a different way, a more efficient way. And that's what's here. And then on the right-hand side, which is actually being blocked by John's board there, is the idea of incremental expansion, incremental improvements, looking at bus rapid transit options in specific corridors, not the Greenlight plan, but we have developed essentially incremental a la carte options that in total essentially reflect what was the bus elements of the Greenlight plan. Okay, so over here at the very top, you'll see the first column is called existing system. That's the existing service, and then the blue lines reflect the frequency that the routes operate. So, and then as you move across, you see 4 maps of Pinellas County. That's a snapshot of the amount of service that we operate today at different times of the day to kind of show span. And I really want to show my appreciation for our planning staff, Cassandra, Heather, Chris Cochran, for working to develop these. These are a little bit dated in the fact that they are still based on the community bus plan that was done 2 years ago. as we've discussed, the economy has improved, and a lot of the financial assumptions are better now. So the overall reduction probably wouldn't need to be as great, but this is the plan. This is what we have today to show you. So you can see 5 p.m., that is our peak hour, the peak time of when we have the most service out there, because that's our highest ridership time, is rush hour, 5 o'clock. 8 o'clock, which is a little bit after the rush hour, sort of as a demonstration of off-peak. After 10 p.m., late night service, you can see that there's hardly anything operating less after 10 o'clock. And then Sunday service is on the right-hand side. So the top is the existing. This shows, and then this is also shown there. We have 40 routes. Some routes go to midnight. We have ridership about 14.5 million rides a year. 583 direct jobs at PSTA are created, with 167 buses at 5 o'clock out driving around. And then you can see how the service operates today. The core route scenario, which is the next line of routes, was this extreme position that was recommended by the consultants and that the PSTA board adopted, that we would take whatever revenues we had, resources we had, and concentrate them on the high ridership corridors. US 19, 4th Street, Central Avenue, etc. And the benefit of that is, by concentrating your service on the high ridership routes, you can have the most frequency. Frequency drives ridership. And the more riders you get on the bus, the more revenues you get. Is it going to pay for the entire route? No, it doesn't. It doesn't do that anywhere. But the more people that ride, the more people pay, the better more resources we have, and we can have a more sustainable system. The downside to the core system is it eliminates all service to large areas of the county. And that is so much shown also from a coverage perspective in these other set of maps behind Commissioner Holmes here, that the sort of negative of the county, I think, is a good way of showing the areas of the community that would not have any service anymore under the core network. So,
Can you explain that a little bit better?
what these maps are? So basically, there's a negative. This is our current.
It's reverse?
That's where the buses are, right? And then the white would be people that are within a quarter mile, is that right, Brad?
That where people would be within a quarter mile of a route.
So where you see blue, that means there's no bus service within a
So
quarter
you
mile.
can see here's core, here's coverage. So you can see there's more blue on this than there is here, especially in St. Pete. But there's big areas under the core scenario where there's nothing. There's no bus service.
But do you have customers coming from there?
We have fewer customers coming from there. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Over here, on this map here, the dark and lighter colors, it says up there you got 30-minute and 60-minute per trip. Every 30 minutes there's a bus coming by, the other one says every 60 minutes.
Yeah.
And the one on top is 30 and 60. What if you do we not offer transfers? If someone is taking 2 different bus routes to get somewhere, so they pay $2 to get on, and they want to take a second bus to their ultimate destination, do they pay another $2?
Yes.
Okay, so they're paying $4 one way if they're taking 2 different buses.
Correct.
What if you merely changed, did anybody run the figures, if you changed from 30 minutes to every hour, for example, to every 90 minutes on the other ones? Because even the Johns Pass Bridge now only opens on the hour. It's not going to open every time the sailboat's sitting there. What would happen if you merely changed the times and let the people adapt to what the bus is running?
Frequency drives
frequency.
Well, and again, that is what is being demonstrated in these core versus coverage scenarios. The coverage scenario is flipping to that. That does maintain most of many more of the existing routes, but because you have to operate that many more buses on the different routes and keep those routes running, the frequency is substantially reduced.
Right.
The frequency is reduced. Just take a look at these numbers here I have on the screen. So on the core scenario, it goes from 40 to 26 routes. Many more routes are cut. Ridership drops by an estimated 16%. PSTA would reduce its employment by 11%, which we probably can do through attrition, hopefully. And then, where's my coverage? Under the coverage scenario, remember, it's more areas of the county served, but less frequent. Ridership drops by more. Ridership drops by 19%. Fewer people will ride, even though more people have access, because it's not as frequent. PSTA jobs, it's still the same overall cut of 29%, right? It's just spread a different way. Okay. And then you can see, again, the consultant, what they did under all these scenarios is concentrate service where we have the highest ridership. We have lower ridership on the weekends than we do on the weekdays. Maybe for many of the reasons you guys explained about serving employment. So they did reduce service on Saturdays and Sundays from what we have today, concentrating the service more on Monday through Friday high ridership areas. And so you can see on Sunday, on either scenario, it's less than what we have today. Okay. I'm just going to quickly move on here. So this system realignment idea, as I presented to the PSTA board last month, there are things within our own control about generating more revenue through advertising revenue, buying standard diesel buses instead of hybrid buses, buying a whole bunch more smaller buses than we have been buying, maxing out our millage cap, etc. That I feel fairly confident, especially if the MPO is able to provide us some SDP dollars for the bus replacements, that we can move from where John is standing closer to maintaining approximately what we have today overall while realigning it to be more efficient. Again, it's not the same, it's not status quo. It is still a change, but it is a change to be a more efficient system from what we heard from the public, based on approximately the same level of service. It's still about a 4% reduction in overall service, but look at that, it increases ridership. It increases ridership, it gets more people on the buses, fills them up, and has fewer empty buses running around North County. And more riders, slightly fewer PSTA jobs, reduces our fleet size a little bit, which helps with the capital replacements also. And then you can see the different times. Again, Sunday looks about the same as it did, even in the cut scenarios. And then last but not least is on the right-hand side over here by Alan. Again, the idea of looking at incremental improvements, having our legislative agenda go to Tallahassee and talk to them about pilot project on Central Avenue. BRT, which has already been studied. A whole alternative analysis has already been completed on that project. Working with FDOT on the express lanes over the Howard Franklin Bridge in the toll roads to the airport. And then maybe not technically a BRT, but an express bus, an all-day, 7-day-a-week express bus from Clearwater Beach to the airport. Those 3 routes have been costed out and could be looked at in an incremental way. And then if, over time, if all of those could be implemented, it starts to build the network. It's not immediate like Greenlight was, but it's a network that can be established by working on all of those items. And those have all been costed out. We don't have that printed out. We might have a printout of that also, but each of those routes has been costed out. I think as some of you mentioned, of course, the challenge with going to Tallahassee or looking for a special earmark or something for these projects is they have 2 components. They have operating and then they have capital. Operating is every year, all the time. And that's not really the type of earmark that Congress or the state legislature likes. They like a one-time deal. But we have those numbers. We have actually computed the cost of increasing the frequency on all the routes just as Greenlight proposed, increasing the whole network to really go to a grid system. It's $40 million a year to do that, to run the buses on a high-frequency grid system, a la what Greenlight proposed. Just because I know some of you asked for that. Just what would it cost? Just so we have that number out there so we can see if there's ways in which we might incrementally get there. Okay.
Right. One thing I just want to tie to the particularly the funding points that came up. So I think it is the case, right, that sort of everything here is essentially the no new revenue scenario that's sort of been approved by the board, right? So this one is sort of based on the existing funding situation, having to make a number of adjustments to manage the funding forecast that exists today, right? This, I think, is primarily a sort of how do we preserve as much as we can by pulling just about every lever we can think of to sort of preserve as much of the service as we can. That includes system expense reduction, some of that stuff. It sounds like a little bit of incremental funding through the millage. And then this one here would require additional funding to make happen, am I understanding that?
That's right.
That's sort of the funding implications of these three, right?
Outside of PSTA's levers are over there.
Right, this is sort of PSTA's levers, but includes using the existing approved millage. Doesn't require a referendum, it just requires a change in the tax rate, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, but these are sort of all PSTA levers, those are beyond PSTA levers and new funding sources.
Correct.
That's sort of the way to think about the three scenarios from a funding perspective. Okay?
Well, and that's why the assumptions are important. Do you have any fare increases in these numbers?
In these numbers, yes.
What amount of fare increase?
It proposed to be a fare increase in this fiscal year 16, going from $2 to $2.25. Where is it? It's these items. Number one is on the capital side, smoothing out the bus capital replacements as I discussed at the last board meeting, contracting out the express services to Tampa so we don't have to have those vehicles in our replacement program because they're very expensive. Going with the standard regular buses instead of hybrid buses, although I have made a call in, we're trying to look at some options, maybe go to CNG. And then on the revenue side and cost cutting, maximize the PSA property tax, contract out, and increase the bus advertising on the sides of the buses, a fare increase plan where we'd have regular fare increases sort of on quote-unquote autopilot over time to keep up with inflation. The big issue here is it is not enough to just increase the base fare from $2 to $2.25. In fact, if we just did that and did nothing else, we probably wouldn't get any more money. A majority of our riders over the past 3 years are paying less to ride than they used to ride. We've had all this fiscal success and our riders are paying less. They're either going more and more to TD, Transportation Disadvantage Passes, or UPass and other programs where their employers are paying instead of they're paying. People are paying less to ride, and they're finding, they are learning about the cheapest way to ride. That's why they're going to TD. I see no other way, if we're going to go down the road of a fare increase, we have to adjust the lowest cost option, that $8.25 a month Transportation Disadvantage Pass has to go up. In fact, that's pretty much the #1 focus.
To what? Go up to?
Again, what we're assuming right now is all fares go up by 12.5%, which is that 2 to 225. So that's talking about 8.25 to about $10, 10.50, something like that. Something of that nature.
So these are the assumptions that are in that scenario, right?
Yeah.
Right here?
Right.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
That set of stuff is what enables that scenario to happen, okay? But your question about, hey, what exactly is in there, that's a perfect example of, sort of, hey, what information do we need to make the decision, right?
And dollar amounts for each line.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, how much?
Which levers are how big?
How much did we ask MPO for? What was the amount?
$8 million
A year,
a year.
and haven't watched the meeting, what was the response?
Mixed. I would say the overall response was they want to know the impacts to existing priority road projects that are on the list, which is certainly natural, and we understand that. We've had discussions with FDOT, and we're providing some clarity to that. Probably I would say the outcome was, and talking further with FDOT, was 8 million might be a strong ask, and it might be somewhat less than that, but there seemed to be some willingness to put the buses on the list to start, and then see where we go from there.
Okay, so anything else that you wanted to add to sort of lay out what the three options are? I know we're gonna let the commissioners sort of take whatever time they need to look at the maps, get questions answered by staff. Is there anything else that you need to cover about these three?
The SDP funding is, the only, Pinellas MP is one that does not do that for buses, right?
That's right.
Orlando has a thing where they do a percentage, I think it is, and then Tampa does a dollar amount.
Over 50.
So, and then if you look at it, we never got anything from MPO for buses, right?
That's right, that's right.
So every year, when they were doing all these road projects, we got that money and the SDP funds, we were saving them because we were going out there, being proactive, going out the grants and whatever else we can get earmarks and whatnot.
Right.
But those resources have dried up.
That's right. I mean, every other major urbanized area in Florida, and certainly the vast majority of urbanized areas across the United States, use their SDP dollars that they get through their MPOs for multimodal, not just roads. But Pinellas, it's just been roads.
But is that the way that, I mean, they are, the resistance, does it come from the fact that that's the way they've always done it, and they don't want to look outside the box?
Well, I would say the resistance just goes to having a clear understanding. The MPO has a nice priority list that they've had for a very long time of roads. And what we're asking for is to get on the list. And the dollar numbers are still in question exactly. What is the impact to any of those roads that are already on the list, or interchanges on US 19 in North Pinellas? What is the impact if we add transit to the mix of projects? That's the question that we're trying to get some clarity from the DOT right now.
And the ask is not strictly driven because we didn't get the Green Light Pinellas referendum. It's just because the grants, the things that we provided for new buses have gone away.
That's right. That's a good point. This has nothing to do with Green Light.
All right.
Yeah.
So big
Okay.
thing there.
Any other again, I want to allow you plenty of time to dive in here. Any other clarifying questions?
Yeah, Brad, just so I understand it. So all these scenarios here include maximizing the millage and a 12%, 12.5% fare increase? Everything we're seeing is just that?
Just that one.
Just that one, and then this is this scenario plus these
plus some additional
pilot projects.
Okay. But funding
That's beyond.
from
For the red lines on the map, those are beyond.
Okay. Mary, you had a question?
I just want to make sure I'm clear when we're make sure we're all clear. So with those increases that you're talking about there, we're looking at a map. I mean, I don't think any one of us know every single route that's on that map. It's more about the idea of coverage that it's showing, not the exact line it's showing, correct? I just want to make sure, because I mean,
That's right.
I don't want to get into saying, where's my trolley up there? It's really just about the idea of the amount of coverage it's showing as compared to these others, correct?
Correct. That's why we called it option one.
Right.
This is a place to start.
Okay. Then the next question is, does the same apply for the enhancements that are shown here?
Yeah.
They are ideas of enhancements.
Yes. Not set in stone yet, although the PSTA Legislative Committee just a week ago did adopt a 2015 state legislative session with the #1 project being bus rapid transit funding for Central Avenue. So that, other than that,
I get
it's
that.
That's coming to the board next week.
coming
Yeah,
next
the
week,
board
yeah.
hasn't approved that yet.
Right.
And so I guess where I'm going is, I just wanna know, it's just representative.
Yes, that's
Correct.
the right way to say it, right?
Okay,
Again, that
because
enhances-
otherwise I'm gonna get into a bunch of weed questions that is for another time.
Right, exactly,
Okay,
right?
thank you.
This is not, we're not making decisions about any of the scenarios, it's simply to represent what does the no new revenue scenario look like in 2 different flavors, core and coverage. Let's just make sure we all have a clear understanding of what that looks like. This is a scenario, not the only scenario, but a scenario that says, how do we preserve as much as we can, pulling the levers that are within our control. To your point, this is sort of illustrative of what a scenario might look like, where you said, we're gonna go get as much additional revenue as we can to fund these kinds of projects. But
Right.
this map could look very different depending on the board's direction.
That's right.
That says, here's where we want this to go. So again, we're just trying to sort of show a couple of different options so that you can say, here's what I need to know, so I can be ready to make a decision that says, what does the real scenario look like? This is intended to be illustrative to help you just see the sizing of 3 different options, okay?
Thank you.
Chair? Yeah, no, it's an important point. I'm glad you made it. Thank
Let
you.
me just make sure that at least I understand the different maps.
Great.
On the one over on the left, there's the existing system, the core scenario, the coverage scenario, and those are as presented in the community bus plan.
Correct.
Okay, and then the chart behind John, the first 3 are the existing system, the core, and the coverage option.
Correct. That's
And
correct.
then the right column that he has his hand on, is that the realignment scenario?
This?
That is.
Yes.
That's this.
Yes.
That's really the realignment scenario in a different,
Yeah, in different form.
From over
Yeah.
here, yeah.
Great clarification.
All 4 of those maps on the top look exactly the same to me.
Great. So unless there's any more questions, what I'd love to do is have you get up and be able to look at them in detail.
and people
And ask questions, right? If we got experts that can answer your questions.
Yeah.
You're right, they do look pretty similar. I agree. Okay,
Wait a minute.
Okay.
Give them a time.
Jan, did you have a clarifying question?
Yes.
What is it? Yeah, please.
How much of the scenarios that you've done that are the realignment scenarios, are they done based on what you want to cover? Or are they done based on where the highest ridership is?
Again, this is the first stab that staff has taken at looking at a different scenario than what the community bus
But
plan
based
did.
on what?
Based on, I would say, a combination of both those things. Some elements of coverage, some elements of core a la ridership focus.
Okay, so this is probably a really stupid question. I just feel compelled to ask it.
You have my full attention with an introduction like that.
Why would we not, given the revenue constraints that we have, why would we not focus on those routes that have the highest ridership and make them the most, the best, the more frequent that we possibly can?
And that would be the core coverage, core scenario over there.
Right. That's a great question, and I want you to come and sort of see the detail, and then that's one of the elements of the conversation that we can have, okay? What I'm going to suggest to you is, it may take 15 or 20 minutes, I'm not sure. I want to give you ample opportunity to sort of come and take a look at all 3 of these, ask questions to the PSTA staff, make sure you sort of are together, and then we'll come back and have a conversation about, so what's the information that you need to be able to move forward? Okay? All right, take a look. Okay. So now, let's be very clear about what we're trying to do here, right? The reason for doing this was not at all to sort of debate scenarios, express an opinion about scenarios. That's not what we're doing here, right? What we wanted to do is show you just sort of the implications in real life of what some scenarios look like, so that you can say, here's here's the information I need to be able to just be informed enough that I can make decisions about what future scenarios might look like, right? So what's the information that you need?
Street numbers would help.
Okay. What else?
What's the effect is?
Okay, keep going. What else? What, Ken?
Well, I did not get the fact that the realignment, those are all new routes, like the old 90 is not on that now, it's
Okay.
called something else, the 20 or whatever Cassandra called it. So, a layout of the new routes under the realignment scenario with names and.
Gotcha. Well, and I think what you're getting at sort of underneath that is that any realignment scenario, regardless of how big or small it is,
Right.
what you're really looking for is what are the changes,
Exactly.
right? What's the takeaways? What are the news? This is primarily takeaways, but in this scenario, if you're going to introduce new routes, you want to know both. What am I taking away, and what am I adding in? Sort of the details of both of those. Is that?
Yes.
Am I understanding you correctly?
Yes.
Okay.
The details for the new realignment scenario.
Yes.
basically.
Yeah. Got it. Okay.
The financial assumptions, again, up on the screen, dollar amounts for each of those line items. And what is the amount of the deficit we're trying to cover? We had that at the last meeting, but I just need to be clear on that. What's the target? The other thing is walking distance, which I think is on one of the maps. If we're moving a route, are we still going by that quarter-mile walking distance to the new stop? And finally, something Brad said, I need clarity on our reserves, because we've said for years, we've planned in our budget forecast that we would spend down reserves. And I know that we've used some capital grant funding for operations, and that may have negated the need to pull down reserves. So I need clarity on exactly what we did with the federal grant funding that we pulled out of capital and used it for operating. And but for that, how much would we have pulled out of reserves? I need clarity on that.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Okay. Great. Patty, I'm going to go to you. You were here.
Under number 2, number 3, the fare increase plan, is that a given that's going to happen no matter what?
No, nothing is like that.
Right. That's purely. It was sort of designed to illustrate the levers that you would. So this I think these two tie together, right? Any lever that you were going to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any lever you were going to sort of. I used lever, but any change you were going to make, other than what you've already approved in the non-new rev, you'd want to know what is it and what's the financial impact of it, right? Am I understanding you correctly?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, got it. Got it. Go ahead. I'll get to everybody, I promise.
From an ethical standpoint, we're a social service agency. I don't know if this is an Alan question or what, but can we actually do the core scenario, or do we, because of our charter or our obligation to society or whatever, need to do the coverage scenario in the event of funding issues?
Got it. So I think you're talking about sort of any legal or regulatory restrictions
Right.
on, frankly, any of the scenarios. Core is the one that would be most,
Well, no, I'm
potentially most relevant.
Yeah, because
Am I understanding you
core will
correctly?
bring more revenue perhaps, but we have a social obligation to service the entire county. And so that's an issue I think we need to address and get a meeting on.
But the entire county doesn't participate.
Only a couple of cities don't participate.
5. There's
Yeah.
5.
And five unincorporated areas. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, but if I capture this correctly, sort of any legal or regulatory constraints such as, you know, with the core scenario, right? Are there any constraints out there that we need to know about
Right.
to make sure that anything we do falls within the boundaries of the legal and regulatory environment?
That's right.
Okay,
Okay.
great, thank you.
Do we have any input from consumers on the realignment scenario?
Got it, okay,
As opposed to core services?
gotcha.
Thank you, Pam.
Right. And again, I think that's true, I think what you're saying is, that's true in any of these scenarios, right? Is you really want to understand,
Right.
there's the financial impacts on it, but you also would want to know sort of the consumer perspective on any change you're making as well, right? Am I understanding you correctly?
People talk with their feet, but I'd also like to hear what they have to say about it.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Can I ask a question,
Sure.
Commissioner? That beyond just the normal public meeting, hearing process that we would have before we do any changes?
I think we need to be proactive about
To-
asking people, if
to-
we're gonna change routes,
Right.
then we need to be proactive about that, especially those people that will be affected
Gotcha.
one way or another.
We got 48-hour notice.
More than, more than,
You're right.
right, well, so let me tie those two together, right? I think what you're saying is, you'd say, we need more input from consumers, we need to be proactive about it, and it's probably more than what we are, you know, required to do through the hearing process.
Yeah,
Is that
sure.
Okay,
Yes.
great, good, that's, I mean, that's exactly the point of this conversation, right? Is to just clarify, where are you on what are the things you need to know, what are the steps that you would need to take to be able to make any of these decisions? This is exactly the kind of conversation we
I
want to
guess I would want to ask, is there a bus that stops out front, so if they want to come to a public hearing, they can just come over?
Right, yeah, sure, that's an important consideration, right?
Right.
Yep, absolutely.
It was Mark, you was going around?
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
Mark.
Okay, great, I'll take your
You got
suggestion
Ken?
and move around. Yeah, Ken was in, so I'm kind of come to you, Julie.
Bill?
I was gonna give you the
Well, you
last,
said you
I was gonna
walk
give you the
around.
last word, but
Okay,
go ahead.
Oh, I said you going around. All right.
Privileges of chair.
If there is discussion in any of this in regards to enhancements, if that becomes part of the dialogue in the
Mhm.
future, then I think we need to have a list or an option menu, if you will, from staff as to all the various enhancements that could be included.
Gotcha. And I think what you're getting at is you'd like to have a chance to prioritize that list.
Yes,
Am I
because you've
understanding?
got regional enhancements, which is what I'm seeing on that sheet there. But then there are also enhancements that could be just internal to Pinellas County, and how do those things affect our economy? And our tourism and all of that stuff.
Gotcha. So if enhancements are considered in any of those scenarios, again, right, sort of what is the full list of potential enhancements so that it can be prioritized? Is that, am I understanding you
Yes.
correctly? Okay, great. What else? Anything else?
I'm sure I have more, but that was my first thing.
This is
I
not
won't
your,
take up everybody's
it's not your
time.
last chance. I just
Yeah,
wanted
I'll
to get the highlights. Commissioner Law?
Yeah, I think it's important when we look at that map that has the enhancements on it, that we don't lose sight of the fact that there is some dialogue going on at the state level about pilot projects to provide us some additional transportation dollars. And those dollars will only come if we have connectivity across the bay.
Got it.
So I think that's important to keep in the front of our brain, that that's almost a critical piece if we want that enhanced opportunity to get that money.
Okay. Commissioner Newton?
Just three things. The first one is, in any of these scenarios, do we still service our partners? Our USF St. Pete's, our St. Pete colleges?
Okay.
You know what I'm saying, because we got agreements with them, but if you're not gonna stop where the schools and colleges are, what's the, I mean, I'm just putting that out there.
Okay.
And number two, it probably goes towards your regulatory, your legal. Are there any obligations of service coverage for grant money we receive? Because some of it requires you to do certain things for a certain period of time to take this money, so.
Gotcha. So any grant implications? Is that right?
Well, yeah, we work on the regulatory somewhere in there. And the last one, what is the, political ramifications for the people that cut this bus system almost in half?
All right.
But that's not true, that's very poor messaging.
No, not necessarily. When you
It's
got
only
areas-
cutting at 4%,
Well, when you, okay, well, I want, hope, I got 11
and that's
months left.
countywide.
I won't be on the board when these chickens come on the roof, but I guarantee you, I've been around when Dan left, but when he was on PSTA, and we took, and then you guys took out one route. We got 50 people that come to City Hall screaming and hollering about one route, not 4%, one route. So all I'm saying is that because of what has happened, I understand it and it needs to be done. It's gonna be a huge amount of fucking lot. Trust me, it's gonna be some heated meeting.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, and that goes to something, I think this is a good list. I mean, that goes to something I've been thinking about in terms of how we as a board think about this problem. I mean, in my mind, the first policy decision that we would want to make as a board is, is it our goal to try to maintain existing service and realign it to best serve the people that use our service? Or are we, I mean, if we answer that question yes, then I think we're looking at all of these, I mean, I know this has sort of been said, but then we're looking at all of these different ways to get there. I was a little concerned that in the way it was presented that, you know, in my mind, we don't, this is just my position, but we don't want to cut our service by 29% in this county for the very reasons that Commissioner Newton was talking about, for the fact that we have record ridership. So we don't want to be choosing between the core map and the coverage map, because both of those maps present problems for people that use our service.
Got it. Okay. Okay, Commissioner Rice?
I would like to see the core and coverage with the millage and fare increase, to see how that affects those.
Oh, so sort of a blended, you'd be interested in additional scenarios like this
Right.
one, but not including all of the assumptions?
Exactly.
Yeah, right, so sort of,
Those-
let's look at the
those are
full
based
range
on
of assumptions.
Yeah, those are based on existing revenue, but if we're talking millage and fare increase, how does it affect it?
Yeah,
Well,
gotcha.
We can go to what Commissioner Welch was talking about, putting dollar amounts next to those bullets up under.
But that'd be a part of it, right? I mean, they go together, right? What you're saying is, look, I want to see more than just two options. I want to make sure I know what all the items are in each option and what they cost. I think what you're saying is related to that, but different, which is, I'd want to see a little broader menu, so that we can sort of understand a bunch of different implications, right? If we did these two, what does it get us? If we see these two, what does it get us? If we could do these two, what does it get us? Am I understanding you correctly?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Funding menu.
Yeah, okay, gotcha. Ben, did you have anything in addition that you didn't get a chance to talk about? Commissioner Akers?
The only thing, and again, I don't know
I'll
how
come
it
back
fits
to you,
into all
Ben.
this, but just the kind of a sense of the type of ridership that we're getting in some of these areas. Because you could have in an area where you're getting 10 buses a day, and you know they're full, or they're full, and I think that's a very big difference from a bus that's got 3 people on it, you know, on 8 different buses that day. And so trying to get a sense of the number of riders that we actually have, it just at least starts to paint the picture of the kind of service that we want to provide in terms of the size of the you know, do we need a big bus in North County on a certain road, or can we get by with something smaller? So I mean, I don't know how we do it. I know there's ridership, but that's different than the number of people participating, and it'd be nice to have some sense of that.
Well, so let me check for understanding. So I think one way that you might think about that is, you know, these maps, the line, the thickness of the line, right, shows frequency of when the bus stops. You could do something like, almost like a ridership intensity, right? Hey, look, here's the system, here's where the most full routes are, here's where the most empty routes are. Is that, am I understanding you?
Something like that, so we have a sense of how we, and you know, again, trying to maximize our use where it's needed more than just kind of a, because we want to provide that service to everybody, but it may be a different type of service.
Yeah, great. I just wanted to make sure I understood what you were getting at in that regard.
Commissioner, what I learned during the break was that, if I might the staff was saying, it's like tens of thousands of dollars different between the big buses and the little ones. So you might want to bear that in mind. So if you send a small bus out and you may have a situation where you need a big one, it won't be in it because, you know, but I mean, the dollar amount, I think she said that the small ones are in the high 400s and the big ones are the low 500s.
Right.
So
That's where you're headed, right? Is sort of, hey, look,
Somewhat, but again, we get back to the perception of how we operate the system.
Right.
And I think we just need to look at all of it, that's all.
right, yeah, and your sort of ridership intensity analysis would help you to make better decisions about what size of equipment are we running on which routes, right? Okay, great. Patty, and then I'll come to you.
Transportation disadvantaged.
Okay?
And you see what it is without increasing their fare. If they're doing something wrong, we can fix that. We can fix what's wrong. But that is those are the people that have nothing, zero. They're not, just nothing. So to increase the fare to someone that has nothing to start with.
Right. So let me make sure
So I want to see a scenario without increasing transportation disadvantage.
So that was my question, right? Was that what you're saying is sort of in this idea of sort of multiple options and looking at sort of the combination of strategies, a specific example of that is you'd want to see one that didn't affect that.
Increase transportation disadvantage.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Okay.
you understand that some of them just not going to be any routes for the disadvantaged to ride on because it'll be gone. You understand that too, right?
Sure, right. It's a big integrated system, right? Let me go to Julie first, and then I'll come to you, Pat. Okay? And I'm coming to you, Bill.
When we did the core route analysis, when the consultant did that the core versus coverage, they analyzed these routes for all of the things a lot of people are talking about, ridership, use, et cetera, et cetera. The core were the most frequently used routes and displayed all of the national standards of success, if you will. I know Brad has talked about, he either has or is working on creating an internal analysis system of analyzing our routes as to whether we reduce it or add it, and it has to meet certain criteria. I think we need to understand anything above the core, because the work's been done on the core.
Right.
So anything above the core, I think we need to understand what that analysis is, Brad, that's been done on those routes that we're adding to the core.
Right.
And we all need to be in agreement on that analysis, number one. Kind of what Commissioner Evers was saying, what he wants to see. Everybody agrees with the analysis. So then it takes the political part of it out of the picture. It's about, we have a criteria of what is a successful route. And that criteria can use many different things.
Right.
So I think we need to have some type of document that tells us what that is and that we all agree to it. So, an analysis criteria of routes, of what it means for a route to be successful.
Okay.
And then, on top of that, how do the routes that have been added to the core fit into that?
Gotcha.
So that we can all agree that every time we go add a route in the future, it's not because somebody's grandma lives there and we need an extra bus stop, or because we're trying to accomplish something politically, or anything else. That everybody can have buy-in and it's a reasonable assumption of why we're doing something.
Got it. So let me.
So if we were to go to that,
Right.
we would have taken the core and everything that's added on to it, it's had this analysis done.
Got it.
And I think that's important.
So let me test for understanding again, right? Because at its at least the most simple way that I can think of that is what you're really talking about is sort of illuminating what's in the black box, right? Where you say, hey, look, we cram all this data in, we do a set of analysis, and it says, here's the changes you should make to maximize everything. I think what you're saying is, we need to just articulate a little bit more about what's in that box. How do we balance out ridership intensity versus the core versus coverage versus the financial implications, frequency. So we just need to say, here's the list of stuff, here's the criteria that is in the black box. We're still gonna do the analysis, it's still gonna say, here's the outcome, but a little more transparency about what's in it. Am I understanding you correctly?
That's number one, and number two, then actually do the analysis on the routes that
Right,
are,
yeah,
that are being included, so that we can see that comparison.
Yeah, okay.
So we can understand, oh, these main groups of routes all meet this criteria, but these 5 that are added to it for coverage, are they similar? Are they 50% of what these are? To try to spur the dialogue.
Got it.
Because looking at all these maps,
Right.
it doesn't bring any of those elements into it.
Yeah.
And part of that analysis is the human element.
Sure.
But we all have to agree as to what that is. So then when the political fray comes, we have something, some scientific, to some degree, analysis that we've used. But you gotta agree to the analysis, and then you actually have to perform the analysis.
Got it.
So that was the, and then the other thing I think we're going to need in our purview to try to understand how much we want to maybe go in this direction or not, is I think we need 2 things. I think we need a comprehensive list of what possible existing revenue options might be.
Okay.
Whether they're feasible or not, we don't know, but what the existing revenue options that are out there might be. One of which was STP funds, and I'm sure there are a number of others that exist. Doesn't mean we can get them, but what they might be.
Okay.
And then what potential new revenue options might be out there. Just so we understand what those possibilities are as we're discussing this.
Okay, I understand. Great, what else?
That's it.
Okay, Ken, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I agree with Julie on the last statements about revenues, and taking a look at that. Disagree on the core coverage as being our base, because we did talk about this. The new revenue scenario is what we agreed to, but I'm much more of a coverage person than a core person. Because for folks that are on those supporting routes where 60% of them go away under the core option, what are their options now for getting to work or school or whatever? The last time we went through these cuts, the staff did do an analysis and they cut the lowest performing routes. I remember Route 90 in specific, that goes from 62nd Avenue South out to St. Pete Beach, ironically, which is not a part of PSTA. We had folks that served those hotels come to our meeting and said, hey, how do I get to work now?
Yeah.
That route, I think, goes away under core, it's back under realignment. But I think we have to have a lot more conversation about what is a good route.
And that's what I'm trying to get at.
But it's not just the ridership number. I think we've trimmed away that low-hanging fruit a few years ago. And now if it's 5 or 10 people, going back to Joe's comments, I think we've got a commitment as a public service to provide transportation on those routes and not just eliminate it without some options. And I think all options ought to be on the table. Some transit agencies are giving out vouchers for cabs. I'm sure some are using Uber and Lyft, just filling the gap. I mean, it doesn't have to be our service, but I don't think you can just eliminate a route because it's not in the core map and say.
Right, and I think, Julie, what you were getting
And I
at was
wasn't
either core or
saying-
coverage, right? Anything off of the no new revenue
I-
scenario we need to analyze and think about?
Well, what I was saying was anything above core, because the core was already analyzed, we need to do the analyzation.
Right.
I'm not
Has that been
saying
done on
that
coverage
we,
too or not?
I'm not saying
No,
that core is what we move forward with, I'm just saying that we all agree what the analysis is,
Right.
which I agree with you, Commissioner Welsh. It includes many, many different things, but just so that everybody understands what those added routes, so that it looks like maybe the realignment scenario, what it includes.
Okay.
I'm
Yeah,
not
any
sure
new
we're-
analysis, we just need to be clear about
I'm
how
not
we're
sure
thinking
we're
about it.
understanding each other because
those bottom two rows are both the no new revenue scenario.
Mhm.
Right.
One
Have they
is
both, have they
for-
both been analyzed
One is
fully?
for-
And
Core and one is
coverage has been
coverage.
analyzed too.
Yeah, so they've both been analyzed, right? Core,
Right.
core and coverage or not?
Well,
Yeah.
but they've been analyzed differently, and that's what we all need to agree on.
That's not my understanding, so we need to have more conversation.
Well, that gets back to sort of, we gotta be clear about what's in the black box, right? So we can evaluate any scenario, be it core or coverage. Okay, great, okay, great. Chair.
And one of the advantages of waiting until the end is most
I
of
didn't get
everything's
mine,
been
sorry.
said, but
I came
I'd
to
like
you,
to.
you said you didn't have anything to say. I'll come back to
changed
you.
my mind after I heard what you
Well, then we'd love to hear it.
Well, let me get through mine. if I may.
Okay.
I promise I'll come.
I see us having two variables. Basically, one is the service variable, and the other is what kind of revenue might we be available, might we be able to convince the MPO to provide or somebody else. And in order to provide, to convince them whether to provide that or not, we need to know what the impact is on their service.
Right.
Which gets back to this, the route policy. What are the elements, what were the elements of the community bus plan when they developed it? How did they come up with what the core route was? And then have us look at those elements and decide what's important for the people of Pinellas County within that formula. Is it how far you walk? Is it how many riders a day? Is it how many riders in a core period? Because we can vary service by the number of times the bus comes by in the day, or the outside hours, the service window. And to me, that's a policy which sort of stays away from the politics, but it provides us a structure for evaluating and going to the public to say, well, if, based on that formula, if we had this, we could do something else.
Right.
And
So you're building on this point and sort of breaking
I think
it
we
into
just
two
said the
pieces,
same
right?
thing.
We need to understand what the black box was for the analysis that's already been done. We need to have a conversation about what are the criteria we'd like to use on the, sort of,
And-
going forward. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yes, and
Okay.
I think what I've heard staff say is they've kind of refined that black box, which is fine.
Right.
And then the other thing that I'm sort of wondering about is what process do we use to move forward from this point? You know, we've got this
Yeah.
bunch of lists, but it'll probably be some kind of an iterative process. And I guess staff will have to sort of come up with some suggestions on that. But we had talked about, well, is this the first of many meeting workshops, or is this the workshop that we need to do? And maybe we won't make that decision until our next regular meeting, but we've got a lot of stuff here. It'll probably take more than a week to put together. So,
He doesn't have to say that.
I'm gonna guess, yes.
and the other thing is access to some of the details. So for instance, I saw, and this is I'm taking the council member Newton's approach here. I saw the route going away from Hercules, and I said, how many people does that affect? It shouldn't, the policy should be this black box, but I just kind of want to validate that to some of the routes that I know about.
Sure.
So
I would expect that you all would want to do that. Yeah, sure. Okay. Commissioner Law?
Well, as a follow-up to what Commissioner Welch and Mayor Bojowski said, I'm just wondering if on those routes that especially people were using to connect to a major route, is it possible that instead of cutting the service out totally, that there could be like one of those little connector buses that just shuttles people back and forth like we were gonna do in some of the head green light tasks, that they were gonna do that in some of the neighborhoods?
Right.
That might be a possibility. I don't know, but I'm just thinking that if it's not, if it's not like hundreds of people that we're talking about, but they really need that connecting service to get to either school or a job, seems that might be a less expensive way to maybe continue the service and keep it going.
Okay, any other, I mean, I realize I went sort of around and you had a chance to jump in, I just want, anything else that needs to be added here?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just mention again, I mean, this is why I think, in my mind, the threshold question is, do we want to try to maintain the service that we're providing in this county? And, I think, in my opinion, a cut of 30% of service would be devastating to people, working people who rely on us. So before we go down the rabbit hole, in my mind, of debating the assumptions in the core plan versus the coverage plan, I think if we answer the first question, yes, we don't want to cut our service by 30%, then I think we're looking at these issues. And in my opinion, the thing that would help me on these issues is where do we stand as a transit agency compared to other sort of similarly situated agencies and regions around the country. For instance, we're going to be asked to increase our fare. Well, I understand your concerns about that, Commissioner Johnson, but if our fares are much lower than other similarly situated agencies around the country, maybe that makes that hard decision more palatable. The same thing about our administrative costs. I mean, we hear from the staff, well, we're a very efficient agency. I think it's helpful to be able to put that in context with comparisons to other agencies.
We have that through the.
Yeah, benchmarking, that's a good business word for it.
That's how I talk about it, sort of additional benchmark data, funding, administrative costs, fares, any number of other items.
And we probably have that, because I overheard someone say, we have that, so that's great.
We weren't on the board at the time.
As a new person,
All right, but it's important that, this was, what's the list of stuff? So that's something you'd want to know about. Okay, Commissioner Newton?
Yeah, Brian brought this up earlier. After we do all this, are we changing our mission statements and goals? How far away are we gonna be doing all this to our core mission? And he brought that up early on, I think, and you had it up there, but it went away.
Yeah, right.
I'm just saying, that may help us kind of stay, because it started out with servicing our end users, servicing our customers, record ridership. So what are we gonna do with this?
Right. Fair enough. Okay.
I think that some people have the misconception that transportation disadvantage goes to grannies, and it's not just a granny program. Yesterday in our presentation from the agencies, including JWB, they brought up the problem that when school is out all summer long, we have kids that do not eat in Pinellas County because they don't go to school. And they can't get to programs, Boys and Girls Clubs, all of the other clubs. TD and raising the rates is just going to hurt that part. I mean, I don't think you realize it's not just the people that are getting on the bus and going to work. We also serve the community, little children that don't eat. So I just want you to remember that, we don't hear about it normally at PSTA meetings. We don't think about it. We don't think that we serve those people, but we do, and it's important, and it's part of who we are and what we are in this community. Please don't forget that.
I don't know if you're aware, Commissioner Johnson, but we do get, City of St. Pete gets, when the kids are at school, we get funds to provide for a free meal for anyone 18 and under at anywhere about 13 rec centers. And
that's wonderful that they can get there.
I'm saying they get a breakfast on. Well, what we've done was a little bit more proactive. We got 2 vans for each rec center. So we've done some things. All I'm saying is, I wasn't talking about that it would be hard to raise a fund on them. $2 or $4 might sound like a whole lot, but when you're looking at them not having any place to use those cars, because there won't be any routes, that's going to be more devastating. And also, that's for a whole month. That's for 30 days. And I know about the problems that are entailed with transportation disadvantage. I just paid for a car. I mean, Brad shared that with you. I just paid $40-something for a car for a gentleman that was trying to ride back and forth to Tampa just to get a job to eat and work. So I know the people that use them. I'm just saying that we have to be cognizant. We did not get additional revenue. So if you're gonna be cutting routes so people can't ride at all, everybody's gonna feel this pain. That's all.
So, I want to come back to the, because I think you've answered the question that Ben put on the table, but I don't want to answer. I don't want to answer it. I want you to answer it, right? So I think it's the case by talking about. It's sort of inherent in many of the things you talk about. It's certainly inherent in this sort of, hey, I want to see multiple options. I want to see what the various levers are. Those sorts of things. I think it is the case that you've said, look, we understand that that's the approved scenario. We desire to see some other alternatives, but again, that's not my decision to make. That's your decision to make. And so, Ben, I think you push the question appropriately. But is it the case that you say, you know, this is the list of stuff I need to make an informed decision about it, but I'd like to see some other alternatives other than just sort of the ones on the far side of the table here. Is that true? This is where I need to hear your voice, because I don't want to interpret. Thank you. I don't want to interpret your head shaking one way or the other. I just want to be very careful about. I'm not the one driving the decision.
What you've been adding up on the legal and regulatory is the transportation disadvantage. I think those are federal funds. I don't know what they're encumbered with. State fund, but we get. Does it require anything? We just get the money and do it.
Yeah. Right. Sure. It's covered there.
Sure,
Got it. Okay. All right. Anything else? Anything else here? You got a pretty comprehensive list. To your point, Chair. Right? There's a lot of stuff here. But that's okay. That may be what's appropriate. Anything else from your perspective that sort of you say, boy, this is the core set of stuff I need to know to be able to feel prepared to move forward.
I guess that's going to be covered with the Tampa routes, but premium services that people can pay for. Is that in there? Is that up under your Tampa route or your?
Well, I think that would be an option. That's sort of a piece of this, right?
I mean, you got some routes. They said that it'd be a pre going into the airport from downtown Clearwater.
No, I put on the list.
Is it in there?
I added on the list any kind of enhancements.
Yeah.
What?
Here it is. It's right here.
All the options.
Yeah,
for
it's right here.
enhancements.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's definitely
Whether it be outside Pinellas County or inside Pinellas County.
Yeah, Commissioner Welch, you had your hand up.
I did, almost forgot what I was gonna ask. This has been very productive, by the way.
Yes.
Good, thank you.
But I want to be clear, I think Commissioner Diamond, who has the best name for any commission about it.
Amen to that. I have no disagreement from me.
Until Commissioner Justice sits here.
That's right.
But I think the point he keeps bringing up is an important one, and I'm in the same boat that, I don't support cutting 28% of our service. I don't think that fulfills our mission as a public transit agency for this county. But everything we talked about today is about making it more efficient.
Yes.
And finding cost savings where we can. And I think that's important. I just want to be sure that I heard right on the realignment scenario. Is that still a 28% cut? Or I heard 4% at some point. What percent cut? So this is a 4% cut versus 28.
Right.
4%. It's got 28 routes.
4%.
Hold up, y'all are confusing me.
We're confused.
4% cut, not a 28% cut, is what we're seeing.
4% versus 28 routes.
So 28, it's going down 28 routes from 40.
Okay, 4% cut, not a 28% cut. All right, based on us doing everything in this list up here.
Right.
That we're going to assign numbers to, so we know exactly what each line does. Okay.
So let me build on that, right? So I think if I sum up this whole conversation, right? I think what you've said is, hey, look, these were helpful from an illustrative standpoint to surface. Here's the stuff that we would consider. What we'd like to see is what are the options that, instead of one realignment option, are there multiple options that pull varying degrees of these levers? Articulating the financial implications, articulating what's the criteria that we're using, and on those criteria, what are the pluses and minuses for each of those? That's what I'm taking away, right? Is that you're saying, we get that's the approved scenario. We'd like to see some other potential possibilities. Here's the stuff that's important to us. So tell us this stuff when you tell us about what the new options are. Am I understanding it correctly?
Yes.
I believe so.
Commissioner Welch,
Awesome.
I got 7 when I divided 40 into 28. I got 7%. So I don't know what.
Depends on how you define service, I think.
It's revenue, it's miles. Those are percentages of miles.
So it's, I mean,
Right, so
right,
7% reduction in routes.
right. Anytime you talk about, right, that's why you articulated 4 or 5 different ways to measure cut or add back, because there's multiple, to the point that you started the conversation on and certainly got fleshed out by many others, there's a whole bunch of different ways to think about impact. That's part of the point, is you gotta say, here are the ways we think about the various impacts, and here's how we prioritize those impacts, right? Okay, Chair.
I was just gonna expound a little bit on that, that when we talk about cuts, there's different ways of talking about cuts.
Right.
And it goes back to policy of how do we define our service?
Right.
Because is it the number of unique people we serve? Is it the number of
Right.
total rides that we have? Is it the number of hours that we have on the road? Is it the number of miles of service that we
All kinds of
provide?
different ways you could measure it.
Which gets back to that policy of how are we going to evaluate our options, given our options on the
Okay,
and
great.
I wanted to ask, some of you have participated more fully in this discussion than others. And for those that have not participated as fully on these discussions, have we covered the things that you've been thinking about, worrying about, and just are a little bit more hesitant to jump in? I don't see any hands going up for So
Okay.
it's a question of, has this been a productive session for the
Yes.
group?
Yeah. Good. Okay, so
That
let
asks
me,
the next question though, do we need to do some more?
right, so that's the last question for the day, right? Is sort of, so what happens next, right? And I'm happy to facilitate that conversation.
Well,
It's not my place to make a recommendation about what you do, right? That's my point.
I would love to be a part of the conversation. I don't think it should go to a planning or finance committee with a few people, because then we want to debate it when it comes upstairs, and we'll be there all day, and the guy is trying to do this. So maybe a workshop, to at least get into the weeds when we get more data.
Okay.
The dollar amounts and street, and the stuff we just.
All this stuff.
Capture. If we get that back, then we can maybe.
Yeah,
get down
okay,
to-
okay.
I think on the major policy issues, such as maybe how we analyze a route, what those things are. That's really kind of a policy thing.
Mhm.
Maybe it's not all scientific, maybe there's human factor in there.
Right.
I think that's something that every one of us has to agree on, and that to me could benefit from a facilitated conversation.
Okay.
So something like that. If there are other policy things like, if we do obtain revenue in a way that we didn't anticipate, what are the things, what the types of enhancements that we might go for? Is our vision solely regional, or should we be looking at a certain percentage of our enhancements being internally to Pinellas County? And what does that serve? Is it jobs, is it tourism, those things? So there's a guideline for no matter who is on this board, the guidelines are the same.
Right.
Again, that's kind of a policy developed conversation that I think could also benefit from a facilitated conversation. I'm sure I could, while other people talk, I could think of 2 or 3 more things, but I think those overall conversations would probably help our staff a lot.
Right, some core policy conversations,
Yeah.
right? Okay, great. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely think a follow-up workshop would be well. I mean, this is just so important to what we're doing in our future. I don't know that it necessarily needs to be 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. We could probably do it, a 9 a.m. to 12 workshop time period, but if we could have a chance to look at all the info we've requested so that we can digest it and understand, the methodology that was used to arrive at some of the numbers, I think that would be really helpful.
Okay.
And I'm not saying a workshop on methodology, I'm just saying, so that I can make notes to know, oh, how did we get to 4% reduction versus 28? But I don't need a PowerPoint presentation on methodology.
Okay. Okay, any other thoughts? Okay,
Concur with Commissioner Rice.
okay. Okay, so I think what you're saying is, and I put the parentheses S here, because I think it's yet to be determined whether it's one or multiple, right? But certainly one that talks about sort of this idea of what you call route policy, right? What are our criteria? How do we think about how we evaluate the impact of things is something that you'd like to spend some time on and articulate and have a chance to get your hands dirty around. There may be others as well, I don't know, but that's the one I've heard you articulate thus far. I think it is the case that you may potentially have again, workshop or shops to evaluate sort of additional scenarios, because you've said, look, we desire to see something other than just the core and coverage. Here's the stuff we want to know about it, but we desire to see something else. I would expect at some point Brad and his team are going to come back to you and say, here's what those alternatives look like, and you're going to want to dive in on those too, right? So it's sort of an alternative scenario workshop, I'm using workshop in the broadest sense, where sort of after you've developed your policies here, you'd want to say, let's apply those policies to a set of alternatives and see where it gets us. It seems to me that would be an appropriate next step as well. What do you think?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Commissioner Eggers?
Yeah, just, I'm, again, from one who hasn't been at a meeting yet, okay, so I have to, is there any room for a 10-minute or 15-minute strategic module at our commission meetings? For instance, Commissioner Welch brought up the whole discussion about reserves and the clarification. Why can't we talk about that piece for 10 or 15 minutes at a regular meeting under strategic implication or something, whatever you want to call it, and talk about, just knock some of these things that we can talk about separately off? Or is that just out of does that not happen? Do we not have time for that?
Okay, Commissioner Law?
Well, we haven't talked about it today, but because there's always people coming and going on the PSTA board, I'm just wondering, and to expand a little further on what Councilor Rice said, if maybe we shouldn't have another workshop that does go from 9 to 3, and after we get done with this conversation, or maybe even before, we have a module that's dedicated to leadership. And do we have the right seats and the right, what was that Bob used to say, Ken? The right seats
I don't
and the right
remember what Bob used to say.
bus? Or the right people in the right seats on the right bus. Do you know what I mean? Like, because beyond the strategic discussion that Commissioner Eggers talked about, there's also the whole issue about reserves, and I know when Brad first came, we didn't really have much of a reserve, did we, Brad, if any?
You know, we had a ton.
Well,
We've had a ton all along.
Well,
we adopted a 30% millage increase, which, for the purpose of bridging us to the
Green
next
line.
step, the green line, what became the green line step. And so in that strategy, it was to build up some reserves that would carry us through the transitional period.
no, I get that, but my understanding is that when Brad came on board as the person to lead PSTA, that financially PSTA was in very bad straits. And he has brought us to the point where we became pretty sorry. Is that wrong?
I don't know that we were in bad shape. We were looking ahead and not being able to do some of the things that we wanted.
Or isn't that where we are right now?
Well,
Yeah, we were in bad straits because the economy tanked.
And we're at
Yes.
one.
And we were ad valorem, yeah, we were. That was the whole reason
The
we
nature
started
of the
looking at
structure.
green line.
Nature of the structure, right. I'm not sure I understand what your suggested next step is.
I don't know what you don't understand.
what would be in the leadership module?
Well, just the, how the organization is, you know, what the scope, I don't know, forget I said it. It just seemed like it needed to be discussed, but maybe I'm wrong here.
Okay. Any other thoughts, Ben?
I mean, I support the idea of an additional workshop, obviously. I also think that there's a way we could use our board meeting time more to work on some of these harder policy decisions we're going to have to make. I mean, I read everything that's sent to me beforehand by staff. I know other commissioners on the board do. I think there could be a way where we use the consent agenda more to take care of sort of the day-to-day housekeeping work that we have to do as a board, and use more time in the board meetings to try to hash out what some of these issues would look like.
Okay.
Once we get through the additional workshop, which I support, we may want to do a traveling tour around the county to educate the public and get input on what's about to happen.
Yeah, sure.
Because if you don't, I mean, you're still gonna have a windfall of people complaining, but at least you'll try to get out in front of it instead
Yeah.
instead of that being reactive.
Yeah, sure, that's part of what you described about sort of, hey, look, we gotta, any decision we make, we gotta make sure we get out,
Describing it, getting input about.
get out in front of it, yeah, getting input first, and then certainly describing it later. Okay, anything else?
Just want to be clear on the timetable. I think our last meeting, we had some projections that showed we could keep our current service through FY18 by spending down reserves. Is that correct, Brad?
Right.
So what's the target date for this scenario, or whatever new scenario we agree to?
Great question.
What are you recommending? Is that FY17, 18, is it next year?
Well, I'm recommending that we go ahead and start this work now. I mean, it's analysis now, and that,
When would the routes change, I guess is what I'm asking.
well, that's open, but I mean, if we can reach some conclusions in time for this fiscal year on certain things, then they would implement, some things could be incrementally changed October 1 of 15.
But it does not have to happen next fiscal year.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
No, that's a great question. Okay, anything else? Any final comments from you, Mr. Chair?
I'm just observed that there's an incredible amount of passion on this board for public transit. And I think that's one of the best things that's really come out of this meeting. We've gotten everybody involved, and I'm heartened by that.
Okay, terrific. Okay, great. I apologize for running you 10 minutes past the deadline. I don't like to do that, but today it was important to make sure we clarified next steps. Okay, great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.